freelance writing is a hazardous job. And so, I'm always sort of pitching for new ideas and anything that's writing related. And I also do a lot of writing for medical attorney-based companies, where people who've had medical problems through prescription drugs. I do a lot of writing in that field. And also just wrapped up a manuscript on the Men in Black, which will be published next May. Now, I wrote a book about 4 years ago called On the Trail of the Saucer Spies, which was how government agencies secretly watch people in the UFO field. But this, and that was more from the government angle, but this new book will be sort of addressing more the whole Keel, Barker, Bender aspect of the Men in Black. In other words, the paranormal, supernatural aspects and overtones that go along with the whole MIB thing, rather than just, government, quote, secret agents or whatever. So that's what's been keeping me busy the last few months.
Now, I'm going to ask you one thing as a hint, and you can say, you know what, wait for the book. But in doing this sort of thing, do you think that you found any providence for all this Men in Black stuff, that there's really something to it?
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that there is. I'm absolutely convinced of that. And I've been convinced for a long time. That's one of the reasons I wanted to write this particular book. That's a lot of people either take the view that there's nothing to the Men in Black stories, that it's all hoaxing or Walter Mitty type UFO researchers, overstepping the mark and banging on someone's door and saying, I read your article or your story in a newspaper, and please give me all the details. And, every UFO group wants the scoops, so they may have said occasionally, don't tell, this group or that group, and then people think they're being visited by the Men in Black. Or it's, hoaxing, etc., or it's all government people. But the more I've dug into it, the more I've found that there seems to be a very sinister aspect to a lot of MIB stories that go far beyond the whole idea of government personnel, and which touch upon everything from like tulpas, tricksters, paranormal aspects, weird synchronicities, with these strange characters just kind of materializing out of nowhere and almost seem like temporary entities is the best way I can describe them.
It sounds to me like this is the entire so-called John Keel syndrome.
Well, yeah, I do, Keel is a person like Vallée who I have a great deal of respect for in their writings and conclusions, and I think the simplistic approach that MIB reports are hoaxes or government agents is so far away from the reality of the situation to be almost laughable that I think we're dealing with a phenomenon that's very difficult to comprehend, but that to me it's almost as if the angle of warning the witnesses not to talk about UFO encounters is secondary. I think the primary focus is instilling fear in the person. And I think one of the things I talk about in the book is the idea of these being sort of predatory paranormal entities that may feed on emotion and fear.
So basically it's like to run is an invitation to being chased. That's what John Keel said. So if you fear something, you can cause it to come your way.
Yes, and also I think these entities, as I point out in the book, I think fear is a key component of their existence, almost like tulpas that feed on high states of emotion. I think, the threat and the warning is secondary to the emotional state that the threat creates in the person. I think that's why we even get reports of MIB turning up in truly innocuous, UFO cases of no real merit, because it's not the case that's important. What's important is instilling this shock factor in the witness that I think these MIB somehow almost like prey upon. And I know that's a controversial theory, but I think I've been able to put together a lot of evidence suggesting that, these entities could be the same ones that 500 years ago were responsible for tales of like predatory vampires and things like that. It's all to do with entities that seem to be somehow feeding on the human psyche, if you like.
Well, I'll tell you what, that is not going to be the topic of this week's discussion. How about that, ladies and gentlemen? But you know what? That tantalizes us because we kind of think, when that book is out, you're going to be back And we're going to explore that in far more detail. And maybe at that time we'll bring on my friend Alan Greenfield or perhaps Jim Mosley to also talk about their understanding of the Men in Black lore. So anyway, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? We're not going to talk about the Men in Black any further this time. We're going to keep you curious because, Nick is still doing the final work in the book. He submitted the manuscript, goes through the editorial process. Maybe the Men in Black will visit him.
Mm.
Yeah,
well, if
right.
I do,
just what he wants, right?
That'll be a good accompaniment to the book. So.
Well, it'll certainly make things a lot more interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
It'll be wild, wicked, and woolly. But before we get too wild, wicked, and woolly, let me tell you, neighbors, that on this particular episode, Nick Redfern is going to be talking about his new book, which is called The NASA Conspiracies. Now, NASA Conspiracies cover everything from the theory, and as a matter of fact, was very popular in the Paracast forums, whether the moon landing was staged by NASA for one reason or another. That never really happened. To the faces on Mars, to all sorts of possibilities, real or imagined. The conspiracies could be a dime a dozen. They could be credible. We're going to have to figure out exactly what's going on. So we have two co-hosts. We have Chris O'Brien, and we have Nick Redfern, author of The NASA Conspiracies. I'm Gene Steinberg. And now we're going to ask both of these gentlemen to try to do a chorus. You're in
the Paracast.
Jacques Vallée, Bud Hopkins, Brad Steiger, Nick Redfern, Lauren Coleman. You'll find classic and new books by these and many other authors at Anomalous Books, the #1 publisher of Fortean books on the planet. They specialize in books on UFOs and aliens, Bigfoot and cryptozoology, parapsychology and the paranormal, as well as alternative history, all of which makes Anomalous Books simply phenomenal. Check out their catalog at anomalousbooks.com. That's ANOMALIST books.com.
Hi, this is Tamar from Namecheap. We're a domain name and web hosting company, and we really care about our customers. With domain name purchases, Namecheap offers free SSL and free WhoisGuard for a year to protect your identity from spammers. Most importantly, we care about you. If you'd like to learn more, please visit us at radio.namecheap.com, radio.namecheap.com for web hosting and domain name specials. You can also follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/Namecheap or become a fan of ours on Facebook at facebook.com/Namecheap. See you online.
Have you ever felt like the United States government knows way too much about your financial affairs? I continue to hear stories about property seizures, frozen bank accounts, confiscation of stocks and bonds. It makes me wonder if the U.S. citizen will ever again have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Unfortunately, with the Drug and Money Laundering Act, the IRS Revenue Ruling 6045 of 1984, and the Trading with the Enemy Act and Franklin D. Roosevelt's Executive Order of 1933, some precious metal holdings are subject to government intervention. For this reason, Midas Resources has prepared a report explaining the boundaries of trading precious metals privately. Whether if you have any intention of trading with Midas Resources or not, I have instructed my representatives to give this report out free. Call for your free copy at 1-800-686-2237. When investing, always proceed with caution. Again, call 1-800-686-2237. Exercise your legal right to trade metals privately. 1-800-686-2237.
Becoming a modern smoker is now easier and more cost-effective, thanks to LeSig. Traditional smokers the world over love LeSig. E-cigarettes with a look, feel, and taste of real cigarettes, but without the nasty smoke, ashes, or stains. LeSig is powered by revolutionary microelectronic technology. A small rechargeable battery and unique replaceable cartridge provide all the satisfaction and benefits of smoking without the smoke and all the hazards. See the large variety of LeSig e-cigarette supplies and accessories at LeSig.com. That's LECIG.com. LeSig is competitively priced, comes with the best customer service, a 30-day warranty, and satisfaction guaranteed. What a great gift idea. For a 10% discount, mention GCN when you call 870-518-4307. That's 870-518-4307. Ask for fast, free same-day shipping. Order online at LeSig.com and use promo code GCN at checkout. That's LECIG.com. LeSig, for today's modern smoker.
Question: what would you rather drink? Acidic water, which burns holes in your body and causes loss of bone mass, or alkaline water, which promotes high energy and vibrant health? The answer is clear. And if you're drinking acidic water, you're helping cancer cells and bacteria to grow out of control. AlkaVision Plasma pH Drops combine a unique formula of the most alkaline minerals. Using Plasma pH Drops is the best way to alkalize your water and help you get rid of acid and regain your health and energy. Simply put 10 drops in the water you drink to raise the pH to a healthy alkaline level. Most experts agree that the water you drink should be at a pH level of 8 or higher. Disease organisms like bacteria, viruses, or cancer cannot survive in an alkaline high pH environment. Order your bottle of AlkaVision Plasma pH Drops now by going directly to alkavision.com. That's ALKA Vision.com, or by calling 269-409-1776. Again, 269-409-1776.
America's #1 source for independent talk radio for over a decade. We are the GCN Radio Network.
We want to hear from you. If you have a comment or question about the Paracast, send it to news@theparacast.com. That's news@theparacast.com. And don't forget to visit our famous Paracast community forums at forum.theparacast.com. Get in on all the action at forum.theparacast.com.
Nick Redfern, our co-host and our guest, author of the NASA Conspiracies. I'm Gene Steinberg. Chris O'Brien is our co-host. You're in the Paracast. You know, it's not the most important conspiracy, maybe, but I'll bring it up. You see, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, our friendly neighborhood members of the Paracast forums opted to talk about the possibility that there was no moon landing. So the question I'm going to ask Nick Redfern, before we even get to that, I'll create a cliffhanger. Nick, the NASA Conspiracies, why did you come to write this book? Did you find that some of these conspiracies are really true?
Yeah, I mean, the whole thrust of the book is an examination of the various theories or conspiracy theories surrounding NASA and everything from UFOs, space on Mars, etc. It's not an upholding of all the theories. It's my sort of examination and conclusions based around an evaluation of the available evidence. And the reason as to how and why I wrote the book was because, you know, a lot of books have been written on single subjects like the face on Mars, like the moon landings, etc., or astronaut sightings of UFOs. But what I felt hadn't been done was kind of like an unbiased approach, because, you know, most of the books written on did we go to the moon were written from the perspective of, well, no, we didn't. Most of the books written on the face on Mars were written from the perspective of it's definitely, you know, a sculpted face that dates back into the, you know, ancient past. So what I decided to do with this book was to try and present logical arguments in chapter-by-chapter format that would address the salient points, if you like, so the various conspiracies, and then be able to offer the reader, you know, some sort of meaningful conclusion as to what I felt was going on and how and why. And, of course, one of the most important things is that a lot of people don't realize there are so many different conspiracy theories relative to NASA. You know, we're not just stuck on the face on Mars and did we go to the moon or not. You know, there's dozens of weird stories, which, you know, from book writing perspective is a good thing.
Okay, so we realize that. What about the rumors of the moon landings being faked? Where did that come from?
Well, you know, I mean, a lot of it came in the early 1970s from a man named Bill Casing, who actually worked closely with NASA and doing contract work, etc. Now, Casing was one of the prime movers, I guess, that got the whole movement going. You know, the notion that the moon landings were faked, primarily due to the fact that NASA, according to Casing, simply did not have the expertise, the technology to safely send people to the moon, land them, and get them back in one piece, you know, with all the hazards that would go along with this. Everything from, you know, outer space radiation, calibrating the landing and takeoff, etc., and ensuring they got back, you know, as I said, in one piece. Of course, I think, as I point out, you know, I think one of the most important issues, but it's also one that a lot of people forget is that there's very good reason to be jaded and suspicious of anything we're told by government on any issue, because we're so used today to being kind of lied to in sort of almost like a Matrix-style world, where we don't know what to believe or what's going on. You only have to look at things like Iran-Contra, weapons of mass destruction, war on terror, etc., to realize that there are so many odd facets to these conspiracies or, realities, however you want to term them, that it's understandable that people would have jaded views on anything that comes out of the mouth of officialdom, shall we say. And I think that's an important factor. I think also, legitimate questions have been raised about certain aspects of the moon landings. The big question is whether or not these legitimate questions have legitimate answers or not. Now, of course, one of the most famous and controversial things that's been brought up about the moon landings is that on one particular mission where you see the astronauts planting the flag, it seems to wave. Now, of course, in a vacuum, you simply cannot have a waving flag. And a number of books have addressed this issue and, loudly proclaim that, the flag moves when the astronaut plants it. And, well, yes, it does. But what a lot of people don't point out is that it only waves when the astronauts are handling it. The flag in the relevant footage is actually on screen for, I think it's like 28 minutes or 31, I forget now. But regardless, it's pretty much half an hour.
Basically, the reason it's waving is because there's physical movement on the part of the astronauts to make it move. It's not because of some unusual force or because it was done in an area where there was a wind. And you kind of think, too, if NASA was that stupid in the first place, they deserve to be caught, but wouldn't they allow for that if they were staging this?
Well, yeah, I mean, you can look at it two ways. Some people say that they weren't that stupid, that there were whistleblowers who were trying to get the truth of the matter out. Now, that's not implausible, but I would be far more impressed by this flag-waving story if at any point after the astronauts actually let the flag go after it's planted, it moved even once. And unfortunately for those who say this issue is relevant, it doesn't move. People don't have to take my word for it. The ironic thing is that many of the people who uphold this theory in lectures and conferences only show it moving when the astronauts plant the flag. They fail every time to show the rest of the footage where it's just not moving. And to me, that's an uncritical, biased approach. If you're going to make this claim about the flag having relevance, you should point out that it doesn't move at any other occasion.
Okay, that particular argument doesn't sustain itself. Any other arguments being voiced by the adherents of the moon landing is fake theory? Yeah,
I mean, another one, of course, is this issue of why there are no stars in the sky on many of the photographs. And, of course, the conspiracy theorists would argue that NASA simply didn't have the capability to accurately determine where all the stars and the planets would be, in the right place at the right time. And in a worst-case scenario, somebody might realize that they're actually in the wrong place. And so they did the best thing they could do, and that was to, obliterate the stars from the sky. If, it was filmed on Earth somewhere, and then people realize, well, hang on a minute, we're seeing stars from the perspective of where they would be in the Earth's night sky. Now, again, NASA has put forward what I believe to be valid arguments. It's kind of like you're looking up in the sky in the day. Occasionally you'll see the moon. Very occasionally you might see Venus. That does happen occasionally, but you will not see stars. And NASA's view is that, the fact that the sun, is beaming on the moon's surface and, the lack of an atmosphere and also the cameras that were being used simply whited out the stars. It was just too bright to actually pick up imagery. Now, of course, then the conspiracy theorists roll their eyes and say, no, that's just not possible. We should be seeing stars. So, in other words, this aspect of the story is an intriguing one, but it's very much like an us versus them type thing where, nobody is satisfied with the other party's answer. But those are two of the main ones.
Got a comment or a question? Send it to news@theparacast.com. That's news@theparacast.com. Tell you what, Nick, we're going to break for a second. We have Nicholas Redfern. The book is The NASA Conspiracies. Our co-host is Chris O'Brien. I'm Gene Steinberg. You're in
The Paracast. Bro!
Ray Perkins, a reclusive veteran burned out from the Gulf War, lives tortured by relentless, perplexing nightmares. Nightmares of a horrific battle in deep space and of a mysterious woman suffering in agony for her devastated world. A woman not yet born, calling across centuries to him. Then, a coincidence leads him to his destiny, his chance to alter the universe. Attack of the Rockoids. The former fiction editor for Star Wars and Indiana Jones, Robert Simpson, writes, "The soul of the novel Attack of the Rockoids lies in its heart and passion for building a convincing tale of a love that spans the galaxy. A thrilling story. Attack of the Rockoids is available now. Read a sample chapter and get a special discount off of the cover price at our website, rockoids.com. That's ROCKOIDS.com. Attack of the Rockoids, a novel in the grand science fiction tradition.
Pure water. What could be better than the gift of health for your loved ones? And who better to help you give the gift this holiday season than BigBerkeyWaterFilters.com? If those on your gift list are drinking or bathing in unfiltered city or well water, chances are that water is contaminated with rust, bacteria, chlorine, and fluoride. For just pennies a day, Berkey Water Filters remove dangerous contaminants from both well and city water, is powerful enough to purify stagnant pond water, and is great for camping and emergencies. Right now, GCN listeners get 5% off all ceramic filter systems and free shipping on orders over $50. Purchase any filter system from BigBerkeyWaterFilters.com to get your choice of Berkey Sport bottles, a KDF shower filter, a set of fluoride filters, or the new Sight Glass spigot. Absolutely free. Visit BigBerkeyWaterFilters.com or call 877-99-BERKEY today. That's 1-877-99-BERKEY. Give the gift of health at BigBerkeyWaterFilters.com today.
Hi, I'm Mark Craighead, founder of Crossbreed Holsters. I designed our top-selling holster, the Super Tuck Deluxe, to solve the problems of being poked, pinched, and gouged while carrying concealed. The Super Tuck Deluxe is the most comfortable, most concealable holster on the market today. We offer a 2-week free trial and a lifetime warranty.
Visit us at crossbreedholsters.com. Don't forget, crossbreedholsters.com.
Hi, this is Ted Anderson. Have you ever wondered why banks, stockbrokers, investment advisors won't talk about gold IRAs? They've been available since 1986, yet the financial industry won't recognize the value of gold for your retirement. Gold has outperformed paper investments, yet no word about IRAs. If you would like to have gold for your retirement, call 800-686-2237. Don't get left behind by rising inflation and low returns. Call 800-686-2237. Secure your future and call 1-800-686-2237.
This is Alex Jones with 5 good reasons you should consider buying a solar power generator. Number 1, new climate legislation could easily double or triple your electric bill. Number 2, our new energy czar wants to control how much power your electric company allows you to have. It's true. Total government control of electricity in the name of smart grid technology is coming. Number 3, in some areas of the country, the power grid is dangerously overloaded. And now, new socialist legislation is only compounding the problem. Number 4, dangerous weather is always a threat to local grids. Every year, thousands of families lose their power from weather-related outages. Number 5, a solar power generator provides powerful backup insurance and peace of mind. Folks, I really believe in the solar power generators offered by Solutions from Science, one of my oldest sponsors. You can get more information at www.mysolarbackup.com. That's mysolarbackup.com. Remember, the government doesn't own the sun, so go to mysolarbackup.com or call 1-877-327-0365.
Are you tired of searching for great talk radio?
Something more important.
Search no more. We are the GCN Radio Network.
This is Jerome Clark, author of the UFO Encyclopedia and other books. You're listening to the Paracast.
Between breaks, ladies and gentlemen, Nick Redfern and Chris O'Brien, our genial co-hosts, are not so genial. They're fighting each other tooth and nail to see who will say the words the Paracast in the most effective fashion. I'm Gene Steinberg. You're in the Paracast, where anything can happen and usually does. The book on the table is The NASA Conspiracies, Nick's new book. And Chris, why don't you pick up on this? Let's pursue the discussion. I guess we're kind of wrapping up the moon landing is fake thing, so let's go on.
Yeah, one of the things that I think you bring up very effectively, Nick, in the chapter on the question of the validity of any arguments that argue against the moon landing is that thousands of people would have to be brought into some sort of loop on that, and it would be very, very difficult to hold something so immense like that secret. And obviously, no one has ever come forward really and as a whistleblower and spilled the beans on any sort of conspiratorial theory like that. So would you like to address that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that is one of the important points, and it says a lot about human nature. I mean, for example, there were more than... If you look at NASA and the outside contractors that were involved in, building everything from like life support systems, the computers, etc., there were actually more than 400,000 people worked on the entire Apollo program from its inception when Kennedy made his speech in '62 about going to the moon to when the Apollo missions finished in '72. Now, 400,000 people, if only 1% of that 400,000 were clued in on what really happened, that's still 4,000 people. I mean, look, for example, at how quickly things like Watergate dissolved, Iran-Contra, even the whole weapons and mass destruction fiasco, and we're talking about they just fell apart in weeks or months. The idea that a significant percentage, or even a small percentage of 400,000 people could uphold a conspiracy like this for more than 40 years, in my view, is beyond feasible. Don't get me wrong, I think there's definitely been some interesting books written suggesting we didn't go to the moon, and I would actually urge people to read them to get both viewpoints. But what I do think is that we would, beyond having just questionable photographs and theories about the stars in the sky and books written, we would have had at least a few credible people come forward on the record and say, hey, I was one of the people who set up the lights out in the desert when we filmed this at Area 51 or wherever, and I was one of the people who flew in by helicopter the lunar module and, we landed it down on the ground and, et cetera, et cetera. But we don't have a single person. That's like, even with things like the Kennedy assassination, which provokes a lot of controversy, we at least have people coming forward saying, I was the second or the third gunman. We don't even have anybody in the whole NASA field of the moon landing saying, I was the second or third cameraman. We just don't have anything like that. And I think that's one of the things that makes this theory, I won't say untenable, but I would say highly unlikely.
Now, doesn't that also augur the same conclusion to the theory that the government knows about UFOs and has the stuff on ice somewhere because somebody somewhere has to spill the beans? Or am I wrong?
No, I mean,
he's got a really good source in the book, the next New York City policeman that came forward and talked to Nick. Maybe you should address that, Nick. That's one of the best, most fascinating parts of the book, I think.
Yeah, this is a very weird story of a guy who I spoke to named John, who was originally in the New York Police Department, and he began working sort of in tandem, not for, but in tandem with the FBI on a spy ring that was supposedly operating in New York, and the police department were working with the FBI. And John is now a very, very elderly guy. This was sort of in the late 50s, early 60s, and he was sort of instrumental in part of this particular program, and when he retired from the police force was actually offered a job with Wackenhut, who were actually responsible for the security at Area 51 for quite a long time. And it was basically a case of, we were very impressed with the work you did when you were within the police force on this spy ring operation with the FBI. Would you be interested, now that you're retired, in doing some sort of contract work or, off-the-record work even with Wackenhut, et cetera, et cetera? And, he was told that it would give him a good, I guess, outlet in the world of private security, et cetera, which is a very lucrative field, certainly. And he was offered a job working at a secure installation in Nevada, which, with hindsight, we would call today Area 51. He stressed to me back in around 1969, 1970, when this kicked off, the term Area 51 was never mentioned to him. It's an interesting story because you can look at it from two ways. John was basically briefed by NASA personnel and people from the intelligence community to the effect that at Area 51 there were stored a number of crashed or recovered UFOs, number of alien bodies, and also an extensive body of documentation that new personnel and people working on various projects would from time to time be required to review and read as part of their, day-to-day activities. And John was offered a position as like a custodian of these files, and as a result he was obliged to read them and review them and deeply understand them. And they told a fantastic story of crashed UFOs and strange beings and bodies found in the New Mexico desert and the deserts of Utah and Arizona and all sorts of places from 1943 onwards, not actually 47, but from the early 40s onwards. And he said from time to time, people would come into his office when he was working out at Area 51 and say, we need to review these files. And John would, pull the files and they would be reviewed by whoever wanted to review them, then they'd be returned. Now, John quite legitimately had questions. This was a one-year contract, and he said, why was I exposed to these files for a period of 1 year? Why was I given access to what would presumably be one of the U.S. government's and NASA's most guarded secrets if I was only there 365 days, and that was it. He actually wondered if all this material was actually totally bogus, and it was really kind of like a test, if you like, to test his loyalty. And certainly after that year finished, he was given very sort of prestigious work within the intelligence community, doing outside contract work in security issues, etc. Today, he sort of views it as like a real hall of mirrors. Was he exposed to real documentation at Area 51, or was it bogus? And if afterwards, a year or two later, he went running to the New York Times or whatever, or even to the UFO community, he would be perceived as someone who wasn't a valued person who could, keep secrets, etc. But if he did do that, no real secrets would be compromised. So he's very much in two minds, even now in his 80s, as to what he was actually exposed to or what he wasn't exposed to. And he was keen to stress he never saw any crashed UFOs or alien bodies in cryogenic storage. It was all documentation that was carefully placed in front of him. And in some respects, you could argue that this very much parallels the whole thing with Bob Lazar. I know a lot of people just outright dismiss Bob Lazar, but his story was almost like this, of deliberately exposing him to certain things, like documentation and craft, allegedly. And I do sometimes wonder if the whole motivation of the Lazar thing was to see if he talked, and if he did, to sort of spread like a meme the idea that there are crashed UFOs at Area 51, and to see then who comes looking. The Russians going to come looking, etc. And if they do, well, maybe we can catch a few spies in the process without actually compromising any real secrets. So I'll be the first to admit the story of John is a fascinating one, because it ties in with NASA, Area 51, crashed UFOs, dead aliens, live aliens, but it could all be some sort of weird, bizarre psychological warfare program to test the loyalty of someone who would later be offered a very lucrative position in private security.
Chris?
Yeah, well, I was just fascinated by some of the details that he came up with in describing some of the documentation. I think there was one instance in there where he mentioned a UFO crash that was investigated by the Air Force in Arizona in the early 50s. And
I wasn't in Arizona in the early 50s, but I have to tell you, we have Chris O'Brien, Nick Redfern, co-host all. Nick's author of a new book called The NASA Conspiracies. I'm Gene Steinberg. You're in
the Paracast.
Is there a secret UFO agenda? Do strange creatures from the darkest corners of the mind roam the earth? Is there evidence for mind control, time travel, or devious government conspiracies? Find out the inside scoop on the latest conspiracies, paranormal activity, and Fortean phenomena when you subscribe to Tim Beckley's Conspiracy Journal. It's jam-packed with stories, special book and DVD promotions, and the best news, it's absolutely free, sent right to your mailbox. Plus, a bonus free email newsletter sent out every Friday. Simply send an email with your name and address to to Mr. UFO at webtv.net. That's Mr. UFO at webtv.net. Find out what they don't want you to know.
All types of batteries for all types of gadgets. We'll say it again. All types of batteries for all types of gadgets. Electronics, toys, flashlights, computers, accessories, and more are at BatteryStation.com. Whatever type battery you need, alkaline, lithium, gel cell, NiCad, metal hydride, sealed lead acid, and more are at BatteryStation.com. Our homepage gives you quick access to ham, marine, police, fire, and aviation batteries. Plus, choose from our great selection of LED flashlights with no bulb to ever burn out and much longer battery life. Find many top brands, including Streamlight, Pelican, Surefire, Novitec, Gerber, and more at BatteryStation.com. You'll also find the most popular brands of ammunition and watertight cases for storing guns, food, electronics, survival gear, and more at BatteryStation.com. Call 417-257-7799. That's 417-257-7799. You will be surprised when you visit BatteryStation.com.
In a coming apart world, you need something to keep it tied together. That something is Atwood Rope, the highest quality rope made in the USA, from exotic braids for military, rescue, arborists, shipyards, tow line, or boating. Quality rope at affordable prices you and your customers can depend on. Find a dealer or shop online at atwoodrope.net. Enter promo code RADIO to receive 100 feet of 550 paracord free with purchase. Atwood Rope, working to keep the world tied together.
Hi, this is Ted Anderson. Have you ever wondered why banks, stockbrokers, investment advisors won't talk about gold IRAs? They've been available since 1986, yet the financial industry won't recognize the value of gold for your retirement. Gold has outperformed paper investments, yet no word about IRAs. If you would like to have gold for your retirement, call 800-686-2237. Don't get left behind by rising inflation and low returns. Call 800-686-2237. Secure your future and call 1-800-686-2237.
Men, take control of your prostate health without the risk of nasty side effects with Prostate Secure. Early detection, regular prostate exams, and PSA tests are a must for men over 40. Listen, if you have symptoms of an enlarged prostate but don't want to take a drug with possible nasty side effects, or if you're over 40, then use Prostate Secure, a natural dietary supplement for men. Prostate Secure is a scientifically formulated blend of clinically significant amounts of natural ingredients. It brings together the most powerful plant sterols like beta-cytosterol and saw palmetto, along with antioxidants such as vitamin D3, resveratrol, and lycopene to support good prostate health, proper urinary flow, function, and more. Check out prostatesecure.com. Order online and save 10% with promo code SAVE10 or call 1-800-239-9432. That's 800-239-9432. Or visit prostatesecure.com. Take control of your prostate health naturally with Prostate Secure.
The GCN Radio Network, providing the world with hard-hitting talk radio. GCN. Great talk radio starts here.
You're in the Paracast. You never know what's going to happen next.
Catch as catch can. That's how we do it here. You know what happens here, because we want equal time. We don't want Chris or Nick, both genial gentlemen, to fight each other from thousands of miles away, because they can do that virtually, because this is a paranormal radio show and anything can happen. Can you imagine, in the 17th dimension, the fisticuffs? Consider the possibilities. The book is called NASA Conspiracies from Nick Redfern. I'm Gene Steinberger in the Paracast. And somehow, how did we get into UFOs from NASA? Curious. Do you think is any evidence at all, Nick, just to raise the question, put it on the table, that NASA was responding in any way to the UFO situation?
Well, I guess it really depends on how you define responding. One of the things we do know for certain is that, in its very earliest formative years, one of the things that NASA did was to contract a report from the Brookings Institute, became known as the Brookings Report, which essentially was like a study. A lot of people assume it was just about UFOs and aliens. It wasn't. NASA contracted with the Brookings Institute to prepare a report on, a whole range of aspects of NASA's work. And it was actually called Proposed Studies on the Implications peaceful space activities for human affairs, kind of like a long-winded title. But it was prepared and submitted to the House of Representatives in 1961. It was kind of like a study of what, the government could expect from NASA now that it was created and, over the forthcoming decades, etc. But one of the most interesting aspects of the report was one titled "The Implications of a Discovery of Extraterrestrial Life." And this is important because it potentially, at least, sort of sets the scene for how NASA would respond to the issue of alien life in years to come. For example, there are sections of the report, quite intriguingly, bearing in mind the whole face on Mars controversy, there's one section of the report which talks about, hypothetically, how NASA, on some of its future space missions to Mars or the Moon, etc., bearing in mind this is written in 1960, might actually find ancient structures and formations on Mars and on the Moon, which is sort of almost like a chillingly eerie precursor of what happened with the face on Mars. There are also questions asked as to not when the general public should be told about the discovery of alien life, but even if the general public should be told, and how it might impact upon belief systems, religion, all sorts of things. Yes, it's certainly the case that the Brookings report was very much hypothetical in the sense of laying out scenarios for NASA in the event that A, B, or C happened. But given the fact that, this was after the 13 years after Kenneth Arnold's sighting and the UFO phenomenon, of course, was in full swing, I think this is an incredibly important document because it demonstrates the way in which NASA was obliged to respond to the nature of alien life. And clearly, NASA was fully aware of the potential social implications of what could happen from a public statement that, yes, UFOs are amongst us, aliens are real, and the impact upon religion, the economy, and everything else. All this was spelled out in the Brookings report, and I don't think it's, entirely coincidental that the response that NASA makes today and has done with respect to UFOs and alien life seems to be driven from that report, prepared only like a year or so after NASA's inception.
Now, of course, the story is that the Russians get into space in the 1970s with Sputnik. We have to respond to the Russians. They beat us to outer space. And, of course, President Kennedy states this goal: we will land on the moon in 1969. So the theory being, again, that this was all done because of the Russians. But the implication here, based on the Brookings report and everything you say, is there was a deeper motive all along.
Well, I think you can look at it from both angles. I don't think it's one or the other. I think, it goes both ways. I think there's absolutely no doubt that, when NASA began in its formative years, bearing in mind we were at the height of the Cold War, this wasn't just about scientific exploration. It was about, prestige and America's position on the world stage as it relates to outer space. I mean, America certainly trumped the Russians massively by landing a man on the moon, or men on the moon in 1969. But, the Russians had launched the first satellite, Sputnik, in 1957. They launched the first animal into space. They launched the first human into space, Yuri Gagarin. In that respect, bearing in mind the height of the Cold War, the whole Reds Under the Beds things, when kids were being told at school, when you hear the alarm, put your heads under the desks and, kiss your ass goodbye, so to speak, to find that the Russians were so far ahead, the only real way it could be eclipsed was by, landing a man on the moon. That would be the ultimate, achievement. So I think it was NASA's early days were as much about scientific exploration as they were as increasing America's position on the world stage as it related to the early burgeoning ventures into outer space.
Okay, but the other consideration being here that it looks as if, whatever else you think, the emphasis on the space program died not long after we landed on the moon. We got a few more there, and then in the 80s we had the space shuttle program, and if you can believe the current political scuttlebutt, well, NASA is all as good as dead because they're not going to continue the space shuttle. We're looking into private industry to ferry astronauts to the Soviet space stations, et cetera, et cetera. We may not get back to anywhere for another, 20 years or so, except maybe a moon thing?
Yeah, I think, this is an unfortunate thing, is that I think, NASA, when the moon landings occurred, 69 to 72, NASA was really on a cusp of where, 10 years from now, if we really push it, we could have like a permanent manned station on the moon. But it was like it all, other than the Skylab, and then in the early 80s, the space shuttle onwards. Yes, that was great news, and the idea of having a shuttlecraft that can go back and forth rather than like the Apollo rockets that are just one-off, it was a great development. But it was almost as if, as if NASA had sort of taken a step backwards, or didn't sort of, jump on this achievement it had made and carry on the impetus and, just keep pushing forward. And I think a lot of people just lost interest. Again, it's one of the sort of ironic things about society is that people lost interest after the first couple of moon landings. It was like, oh yeah, it's another moon landing. The first one was fantastic, but then after the third one, it was, oh yeah, they're going to go up and bring a few rocks back, and what time is I Love Lucy on? That's how it became, unfortunately. And I think part of it could be public relations, the idea of people not understanding and realizing the sheer importance of the fact that we were no longer tethered to the earth, but a lot of people just did not care. It's kind of like today. There's so much stuff going on in the world today that, a lot of people, a lot of serious, deadly stuff going on, but all people are worried about is, what the latest Hollywood starlet's up to and whatever. And I think that's something that parallels what was going back on in the 70s with, the Apollo programs, etc., that people just didn't care that much, unfortunately. It was just, oh, yeah, that's interesting the first time, and after that it was, well, so what? And I think, NASA needs to find a way to galvanize the public, the media, and the government. A lot of people in governments just want to shut down a lot of NASA programs today. I think it's an incredible thing that we could one day send men to Mars and women to Mars and find out the truth about the face on Mars. But, it's almost like, well, what's Paris Hilton up to?
Okay, so if the politicians, they don't know what's going on, then that's why they want to shut NASA down?
Well, I think a lot of it is, it's just ignorance. It's like, I see people like certain politicians from Alaska who know nothing. They know nothing, and they want to run for president. And they don't take the time to find out the important things. And I think that's what's happening with NASA. NASA has the potential to be such a groundbreaking, powerful agency, taking us to such uncharted realms. But for many people, it's just like, oh yeah, well, they went to the moon 40 years ago, but what have they done since? And I think a lot of people, I think it's wrong, but I think a lot of people do view it like that. It's like, should we really be doing stuff in outer space when, half the nation's 300 pounds and diabetic and crime's out of control or whatever, shouldn't we be trying to clear
right, and $1 trillion defense budgets.
We'll get into the politics, and we can't get away from politics when you talk about NASA because it's a political agency, folks. And you can't get away from our forums because they consume so much a part of what we do on the Paracast. Go to forum.paracast.com. That's forum.paracast.com. We have Nick Redfern, author of NASA Conspiracies. Chris O'Brien is our other co-host. I'm Gene Steinberg. You're in
the Paracast. Yes, you are.
Hi, this is Ted Anderson. If you own an Apple iPhone and love to listen to your favorite programs on GCN, I've got good news for you. I'm proud to announce that GCN has a brand new iPhone app available for our dedicated listeners at GCNlive.com. Listen to your favorite hard-hitting GCN programs live or on demand right on your iPhone. And the best part? The GCN iPhone app can be yours absolutely free. Download the iPhone app today by clicking on the banner at GCNlive.com. Again, that's GCNlive.com.
We, the
people grow cotton, weave fabric, engrave ink, embed strips and fibers to protect from counterfeit, then carting to a private bank, having it lent back at interest, forcing taxes to service debt. This capitalism, or was Jefferson correct when stating a central bank issuing the public currency is a greater menace to the liberties of the people than a standing army? Ted Anderson, I'm placing a free silver dollar in a book that explains our monetary system. Call for your copy, 800-686-2237. It's time to understand the system. Call 800-686-2237. That's 800-686-2237.
Welcome back to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio. And now, here's Gene Steinberg.
Hour number 2 of the Paracast. I'm Gene Steinberg. We have 2 co-hosts for the price of 1. Nick Redfern, author of the NASA Conspiracies, Busy Little Bee, coming up with another great book. Chris O'Brien is our co-host. Chris has taken huge numbers of notes about this book, and we want to go through some of that for possibly this hour, emphasize all the questions you have, and then maybe on a little bit later we have a few questions from our forums we'll ask. Chris?
Some good ones, yeah. Okay.
Chris is working for them. That's why he's taking so many notes.
Oh. No, I'm fascinated by some of the stuff that's in this book. And one of the things we were talking about the Challenger, space shuttles, the Challenger and the Columbia and stuff. And there's a really interesting story in here that evidently in 83, Carl Sagan received a really interesting, mysterious handwritten note that had some pretty interesting predictions in it that included the crash of the explosion of the Columbia space space shuttle. And you want to talk about that? The name M. Springfield just in itself is very suggestive. Of course, the same name as Leonard Stringfield. But why don't you address that a little bit, because that's a really interesting story.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I often do, when I'm investigating government involvement in different things, is to use the Freedom of Information Act to try and secure files from government agencies. And one of the things that sort of really surprised me was that when I actually found out a couple of years ago that the FBI had been involved in an investigation that suggested that maybe the first space shuttle disaster, Challenger, when it exploded in '86 and killed all the crew on takeoff. The FBI had deeply investigated the case because there were a lot of rumors floating around about was it sabotage or not. So I filed a request with the FBI to get hold of this file, and I got an extensive file about 2 inches thick that talks about all the different conspiracy theories surrounding both the 1986 explosion and Columbia's destruction in 2003, but also it referenced this weird story concerning Carl Sagan. Of course, is one of the formative people, I suppose, who sort of blended, mainstream science for the popular culture. He did it in a very skillful way where the average person on the street, could understand, appreciate, and also be entertained by, sort of scientific issues. And one of the things that was contained in the file was this letter that had been sent by some mysterious person named M. Springfield to Sagan in 1983 that made all sorts of prophecies about the Columbia space shuttle getting destroyed, which ultimately it did. And also like a Third World War breaking out, but and which didn't, or at least hasn't happened yet, unless you consider we're in the Third World War with the War on Terror. But actually made a number of intriguing statements, that Columbia would be destroyed, which eventually it was. It exploded in 2003 over Texas. It also talked about how Poland would be free by 1990, which it was, with the whole perestroika and, breaking away from the former Soviet Union, etc. And very, very weird letter to the extent that Sagan contacted the FBI, who made a number of inquiries, couldn't track down who this Springfield person was. But it was very much sort of an apocalyptic communication that was sent to Sagan, warning about the destruction of the space shuttle, the end of civilization, nuclear war, etc. And by all accounts, it was taken very seriously by the FBI because it was suggesting that one of NASA's space shuttles would be destroyed. And ironically, almost 20 years to the day, the Columbia Space Shuttle was destroyed, just as the person had claimed in this particular letter.
So what do you think of that, Gene?
You know, these letters always seem to come up after the fact. You know, they turn up, but before the fact, we don't see the predictions. Very few ever come true.
That's right. I mean, this is one of the intriguing areas, you know, not just talking about the space shuttle, but Poland being, you know, free of the Soviet Union. Who would have thought in 1983 that there wouldn't be a Soviet Union, or that, you know, Poland wouldn't be under sort of the grip of the Kremlin or whatever? Now, certainly there were some predictions that didn't come true. I mean, one that was made was that New York and San Francisco would sort of literally collapse into the oceans and a third world war would begin in 1998. Yeah, and also the idea that the world would be poisoned by some sort of weird virus. Well, that didn't happen. But, I mean, is that there's barely a day goes by now that you don't hear on the news, oh, you need an inoculation against this virus, that virus, you know, it's like everybody and his brother's virus. So, you know, there were a number of weird sort of precursors in this prediction to certain things that have actually occurred in the last few years. But, I mean, that's just part of the story. I mean, when it comes to the destruction of Challenger, which occurred in January 86, just after takeoff, this is probably the most extensive aspect of the FBI's investigation of space shuttle-based conspiracies. A number of people in the wake of the Challenger destruction in January 86 approached the FBI and said, you know, I was watching it on TV and I saw what looked like a laser-guided weapon hit the fuel tank of the space shuttle. Now, of course, the FBI, you know, inevitably and immediately began investigating these stories. And they weren't coming, the interesting thing is they weren't coming from crazy people. One of them was actually somebody who lived in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, which is where I live, so I've been trying to track the person down but haven't found them yet, who actually worked in the video production industry and said, you know, he'd analyzed the footage, slowed it down, blown it up, etc., and had seen what looked like a laser-type weapon or laser-guided device hit the fuel tank and explode it. The FBI was so concerned they actually sent agents out to the man's home, not to threaten him or anything like that, but they sat down with him in his living room and watched the footage on his TV, you know, and asked him, you know, can you replay this bit? Can you replay that bit? And that's precisely what he did. One of the weirdest stories was a guy who was clearly deluded by the FBI's own admission. You know, he'd made a number of claims previously that certain space shuttle missions would be sabotaged. But literally 24 hours before Challenger exploded, he phoned his local news station, which was in Florida, and said, you know, that the space shuttle is going to explode on takeoff. And they're like, well, whatever. But they were sufficiently concerned to at least contact the FBI, which they did. And, of course, 24 hours later, the shuttle really did explode. And the FBI were like, well, you know, the guy's crazy, but this time he actually got it right. And certainly the weirdest story of all that the FBI investigated was a case of a woman who said that she'd been contacted by what's actually described in the files as paranormal beings. That's how the FBI describes it. Paranormal beings who almost like channeled, I mean, I do literally mean channeled information into her head that the space shuttle is going to be destroyed 48 hours from now. And she contacted the FBI, and again, the FBI went out to interview her and said, well, you know, ask questions along the lines of, well, who are these paranormal beings? Where are you getting your information from? And it was, you know, a case of, well, they channeled the information to me. And what I find interesting about this particular story is that 24 years later, no less than 28 pages of this particular investigation into this paranormal angle of the space shuttle explosion, 28 pages of the documentation are still classified in the specific interests of national security.
Wow.
So clearly, you know, there is some weirdness attached to the Challenger accident of 1986, even if some people, you know, go with the idea that it was all just a a tragic accident.
We'll get into more of the Challenger accident and a lot more. Our co-host, Nick Redfern, is author of the NASA Conspiracies. Our other co-host is Chris O'Brien. I'm Gene Steinberg. You're in...
Where are we? Oh, yeah, the Paracast, that's right.
Nick, you do that so well, man.
Hi, this is Tamar from Namecheap. We're a domain name and web hosting company, and we really care about our customers. With domain name purchases, Namecheap offers free SSL and free WhoisGuard for a year to protect your identity from spammers. Most importantly, we care about you. If you'd like to learn more, please visit us at radio.namecheap.com, radio.namecheap.com for web hosting and domain name specials. You can also follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/Namecheap or become a fan of ours on Facebook at facebook.com/Namecheap. See you online.
Fate magazine provides true reports of the strange and unknown. Keep up with the latest on angels and miracles, psychic phenomena, ghosts, UFOs, life after death, and much, much more. To receive your free issue of Fate magazine, call now at 1-800-728-2730 or visit their website at www.fatemag.com. That's 1-800-728-2730. What are you waiting for? Your fate awaits.
On the average, Americans work between 45 to 50 years, hoping to build up enough wealth to retire and live out their golden years. Unfortunately, with taxation, the rising cost of food, energy, housing, and medical, many retirees are forced to live below the poverty line. Is this a flaw free enterprise, or is our monetary unit we call the Federal Reserve Note forcing us into perpetual debt, ensuring inflation and higher taxes? These questions and more can be answered by reading G. Edward Griffin's book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. Congressman Ron Paul states it's what every American needs to know about central bank power. A gripping adventure into the secret world of international banking cartel. Hi, this is Ted Anderson. I will give a silver dollar from the early 1900s to anyone who purchases this book. Call 1-800-686-2237 and order a copy today. It's critical that the public be made aware of the system. Call and order your copy today at 1-800-686-2237. That's 1-800-686-2237.
If you own a septic system or if you're facing costly septic system replacement, this message is for you. When you want to stop paying for pump outs and avoid backups, when you've had enough of the foul odors and costly repairs, use BioSafe One Septic Solution. Now there's an easy-to-use 100% guaranteed answer to all your septic system problems. BioSafe One Septic Solution. BioSafe One is patented and made specifically for all septic systems and made by the same team of scientists who helped clean up the Exxon Valdez oil spill. BioSafe One decontaminates and removes sludge, stops costly pump outs and repairs, and removes septic system stench, all with a 100% success rate. See what gives BioSafe One Septic Solution the advantage over any other septic product at biosafeone.com. That's BIOSAFEONE.com. biosafeone.com. Or call toll free 1-866-424-6663. That's 1-866-424-6663. BioSafe One, the guaranteed bio-friendly, money-saving way to clean your septic system.
I'm concerned about food for my family in the event of an emergency, and I know you are too. Are you ready? Don't wait for an emergency to happen. Put a plan together now with quality dehydrated food from Ready Reserve Foods. For nearly 40 years, Ready Reserve Foods has been in continuous operation, canning the finest in dehydrated foods. Other companies just broker canned foods. Ready Reserve is the manufacturer, controlling quality from start to finish with double enameled cans and nitrogen packing for maximum shelf life. Ready Reserve offers a balanced selection of fruits, vegetables, dairy products, proteins, and grains. Choose from a variety of pre-selected units or order by individual can to customize your own plan. When you purchase from Ready Reserve Foods, you are buying factory direct at wholesale prices. Call today for a free catalog, 1-800-453-2202, or visit ReadyReserveFoods.com. Call 1-800-453-2202. Ready Reserve Foods, factory direct, wholesale pricing.
On air, online, and on demand. We are the GCN Radio Network.
This is Jacques Vallée. You're listening to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio.
You're in the Paracast. I'm Gene Steinberg. We're talking about the NASA Conspiracies by Nick Redfern. I'm Gene Steinberg. Chris O'Brien has been asking some very pointed questions. Let's pursue.
Nick, another thing that comes up from time to time in my research is some pretty interesting events that have occurred down in South America over the years pertaining to what appear on the surface to be some sort of either atmospheric anomalies or, if you want to get conspiratorial about it, the crash of alien saucers or alien technology. Of course, Vahinia springs to mind, and there was mention at the time of the Vahinia incident that NASA personnel were somehow summoned to the Vahinia site, and then also there was I think a crash in Bolivia that you talk about in your book. What is NASA's role, do you think, in terms of assisting other militaries around the world, other governments, for events like this? There seems to be some sort of indication that NASA is involved in a sort of transnational fashion. You want to discuss that?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question, good issue. I mean, the thing is with NASA, of course, if UFOs are nuts and bolts craft, and some of them have crashed to Earth, obviously it's a controversial issue, but if this has taken place, then NASA obviously is one of the agencies, like NORAD, for example, that is at the forefront of tracking what's going on in the atmosphere or in near-Earth orbit or, outer space, etc. Now, of course, NASA doesn't just track its own space satellites and spacecrafts. It's also, involved in tracking the spacecraft and space satellites of foreign nations. You look at the Russians and the Chinese or whoever. We know that they send up, as we do, space satellites whose sole role, if you like, is to spy on foreign nations. Spy satellites with extensive recording equipment, cameras, etc. And for that reason, NASA has its eyes on the skies at all times. If, for example, one particular agency says, we've had a report of something crashing to the ground, it looks like some sort of spacecraft, we don't know what it is it one of yours? And NASA says, well, it's not ours. And then the Air Force, whoever, says, well, have you tracked any sort of Russian craft re-entering the atmosphere? And they say no. Well, then it's like that takes the whole controversy to a completely different level. So, well, what is it? And, I think this is an important issue to remember or to focus upon, the idea that NASA are often very much consulted and questioned by the intelligence community because they're the ideal people to, say, oh, well, yeah, it was one of our craft that went out of control, and if it wasn't, then, we need to find out what it was. And this is certainly the case with this incident that you mentioned in Bolivia. This is a very strange story, but it's a significant one because, again, it was a case that I was able to secure official documentation from, from NASA. And basically occurred in May 1978 when some sort of object was reported in the Bolivian media as having crashed in a remote part of Bolivia on a hillside. And it was described as like an egg-shaped object. Not actually a large one, but somewhere in the region of 12 to 15 feet. Some people said in length, other people said in diameter. So we're not really sure of the shape, but, the reference to a diameter almost makes it sound like a saucer-shaped object. Essentially what happened was that the story started doing the rounds. It actually even reached the eyes and ears of UPI, and, the stories were put out on the news circuits, etc. And I actually got hold of a whole variety of files on this from NASA, which talk about this object coming down on this remote area of hillside in Bolivia in May 78, and NASA answering questions from the CIA. The CIA were asking, is it a satellite? Is it a false alarm? And NASA is saying, well, it's nothing of ours, and we've not tracked anything Russian coming down. And then the rumors started circulating that personnel were sent from NASA to Bolivia to check out the area, and that they may actually have even been deceived by the Bolivian government, that the Bolivian government may have wanted to recover this object for themselves and keep NASA out of the loop, and by default the entire U.S. government out of the loop, which actually may have happened. It's sort of a bit of a grey area, so to speak. But certainly the documentation from the CIA and NASA does talk about some sort of object coming down, even about impact markings on the ground where it looks like somebody hit the ground and slid down the side of the hill, but also with no evidence at all that this was a terrestrial craft. Now, of course, the documents only tell part of the story. The issue of NASA personnel going out there and secretly being asked to evaluate the nature of this craft, that comes from sources like Leonard Stringfield, who said he'd been told certain data by various whistleblowers. This is an intriguing case. You know, in some cases, you could argue it's more important than Roswell because we actually have official documentation talking about the recovery of a craft that no one could identify. But then, you know, you enter this sort of black hole of where everybody denies it and everybody kind of just goes home as well. Well, we looked, we didn't find anything. And, you know, that's one of the frustrating things we faced with. But certainly the case itself was a very, very intriguing one.
Another one that NASA personnel were, I guess by inference, implicated was the Varginha incident in '96 in Brazil. And did you do any research on that particular one? Because there were claims that NASA personnel were involved in the, I guess, somehow in the autopsy of the creatures that supposedly took place at the hospital, and there was also the possibility that the NASA personnel have been involved in other sort of landings or crash retrieval type operations. Have you been able to ascertain the extent of their involvement in other cases?
Yeah, I mean, I did look into the whole Varginha case and whatever. The only reason I didn't mention that in the book was specifically because I just could not add anything new to it. I always feel it's important if I'm going to write a book that I don't just want to rehash, you know, old material. I want to try and bring something new to the table. But certainly in terms of crashed UFO stories in general, I mean, there are a lot of intriguing stories involving NASA. I mean, one of them, the most famous one, I suppose, is the Kecksburg story of 1965, where some sort of object came down outside of Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, December 65. So for almost, I think it's actually like 45 years ago this week or last week, something like that. And the story is that some sort of object was seen sort of flaming across the skies and actually altered its trajectory, which of course something like a meteorite simply cannot do, and crashed in woods just outside of Kecksburg. And being a relatively small, you know, community, that rumor soon spread around town that something had come down and that there was a huge military cordon and that NASA and the Air Force were there, you know, keeping people away from the area. There are stories of members of the public who'd secretly managed to get through the woods, seeing like a Volkswagen car-sized object that was sort of acorn-shaped that was allegedly loaded aboard like a military transport vehicle and, you know, taken to destinations, who knows where.
I'll tell you what, we'll get into more of the Kecksburg incident. Of course, we've had Stan Gordon on the Paracast a couple of times because he's been so closely connected with the research. We have Nick Redfern, author of the NASA Conspiracies. Chris O'Brien's the co-host. I'm Gene Steinberg. You're in.
I think we're in the Paracast.
Ray Perkins, a reclusive veteran burned out from the Gulf War, lives tortured by relentless, perplexing nightmares. Nightmares of a horrific battle in deep space and of a mysterious woman suffering in agony for her devastated world. A woman not yet born, calling across centuries to him. Then, a coincidence leads him to his destiny, his chance to alter the universe. Attack of the Rockoids. The former fiction editor for Star Wars and Indiana Jones, Robert Simpson, writes, "The soul of the novel Attack of the Rockoids lies in its heart and passion for building a convincing tale of a love that spans the galaxy. A thrilling story. Attack of the Rockoids is available now. Read a sample chapter and get a special discount off of the cover price at our website, rockoids.com. That's ROCKOIDS.com. Attack of the Rockoids, a novel in the grand science fiction tradition."
Normal blood pressure, naturally. How would that make you feel?
I'm Don from New Mexico. January of 2000, I had a heart attack. Then my real health began going downhill, and I had high blood pressure, high blood sugar, poor vision, and I really wasn't sleeping well. I was a mess, pretty much.
Don reports dramatic improvements with Heart and Body Extract.
I started taking Heart and Body Extract, and from within a few days, I started sleeping a lot better. My blood pressure normalized, my blood sugar normalized, and my sleep really did improve.
Experience these benefits and more when your body gets what it needs with the assistance of Heart and Body Extract. Order at hbextract.com or call 866-295-5305. That's hbextract.com or call 866-295-5305.
And folks, I did not expect this at all. By the 7th, 8th, and 9th day, I saw dramatic improvements from taking Heart and Body Extract.
Details at hbextract.com or call 866-295-5305 for Heart and Body Extract.
Hi, I'm Mark Craighead, founder of Crossbreed Holsters. I designed our top-selling holster, the Super Tuck Deluxe, to solve the problems of being poked, pinched, and gouged while carrying concealed. The Super Tuck Deluxe is the most comfortable, most concealable holster on the market today. We offer a 2-week free trial and a lifetime warranty.
Visit us at crossbreedholsters.com. Don't forget, crossbreedholsters.com.
Hi, this is Ted Anderson. Have you ever wondered why banks, stockbrokers, investment advisors won't talk about gold IRAs? They've been available since 1986, yet the financial industry won't recognize the value of gold for your retirement. Gold has outperformed paper investments, yet no word about IRAs. If you would like to have gold for your retirement, call 800-686-2237. Don't get left behind by rising inflation and low returns. Call 800-686-2237. Secure your future and call 1-800-686-2237.
The food storage industry leader has done it again. Introducing FDG clubs and survival bucks from the Freeze Dry Guy. For over 39 years, the Freeze Dry Guy has served various government agencies and the private sector with the finest in storable foods and emergency rations. If you've wanted to build emergency food supplies but couldn't afford it, now you can. Go to freezedryguy.com, click on products, and look for the Freeze Dry Guy clubs to pay as you go. Now you can build food storage without going into debt. Choose from a payment range of $95 to $450 per month. Our clubs work with everyone's budget. Plus, when you join Freeze Dry Guy clubs, you'll get additional rewards. For example, this month, get 10% back in survival bucks on all purchases in the Freeze Dry Guy product line, plus free shipping within the lower 48 states on any order amount. Hurry, go to freezedryguy.com or call 866-404-3663. That's freezedryguy.com or call 866-404-3663. The Freeze Dry Guy, the best you can buy.
America's #1 source for independent talk radio for over a decade. We are the GCN Radio Network.
Hi, this is Nick Pope. You're listening to the Paracast.
We have Chris O'Brien, who's trying to figure out whether we are or are not in the Paracast. I'm Gene Steinberg, your genial sometimes host. Chris O'Brien has been asking questions of Nick Redfern, our other co-host, who's author of the NASA Conspiracies. Let me interrupt very briefly, though, Nick, about Kecksburg. Is it all possible that was just maybe a secret weapon or a secret aircraft, not something that was weird?
Yeah, I mean, a number of people suggested, one of the initial theories was the idea that it was a Soviet space probe or space vehicle. And there's actually no doubt that a Soviet space vehicle did actually re-enter the atmosphere on that very same day as the Kecksburg incident, but apparently crashed over Canada or broke up over Canada. But even though NASA today say that Kecksburg has nothing to do with that incident, it is kind of unusual that of all the dates when something could have come down in Kecksburg, it was the exact same date that something Soviet did actually burn, a spacecraft did actually burn up in the atmosphere and come down. Now, people have suggested that the object they saw wasn't just debris or wreckage, it was like some sort of fairly intact vehicle. You would imagine that if something had plummeted from near-Earth orbit and suffered the sort of rigors of going through the atmosphere and slamming into the ground, it would hardly be an intact acorn-shaped Volkswagen-type vehicle. You'd imagine it would be just pummeled and destroyed. But that wasn't the case. And people did say they saw the object alter its trajectory and direction, which, again, there's no way that any sort of object plowing through the atmosphere can do that. Because you had these various anomalies, a few years ago, a dedicated researcher named Leslie Keane, who was sort of deeply aware and had investigated all the many and varied complexities of Kecksburg, actually brought suit against NASA, which is, almost unheard of, to try and prise open NASA's files on Kecksburg. And what NASA actually said was kind of interesting. They didn't deny having files, and they actually did release 30 or 40 pages, which didn't really, answer any deep questions as such. They were just sort of fairly innocuous documentation. But what was more interesting is the more Leslie pressed, she found that, certain files that should be existing or that should be available, NASA couldn't find. And it's kind of like the thing we see with the Air Force and Roswell. Well, we went looking, and we think it was probably a mogul balloon and crash test dummies, but we actually couldn't find any files, and that's what NASA is saying. It's like, okay, we don't deny that certain files should have existed on various issues that might conceivably be related to Kecksburg, but we couldn't find them. And it's almost like a damage control where agencies don't want to deny the existence of something, presumably because it might surface later on and make them look bad. So they say, we've searched and we cannot find it. Now, a lot of people presume that means, well, there's nothing to find, but it's almost like a very cleverly worded thing. You say, well, we couldn't find anything, but by definition, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist, or some other arm of NASA isn't hiding it. It just simply means that the people who did the search potentially aren't cleared to know what was going on. I think that does apply to Kecksburg.
Well, when it comes to crash retrievals and that sort of thing, Kecksburg, I think, is a classic case, because we do have eyewitnesses, a lot of eyewitnesses. We do have some documentation. Something obviously did happen there. Of course, Stan Gordon, as Gene mentioned, has looked into that extensively. In fact, that was his very first case as an investigator. What are some of the other examples that we have? For instance, you have a chapter in there about European sightings during the 60s and 70s. What sort of involvement did you find that NASA had in those instances?
Yeah, this is actually really weird. I mean, one of the things I found was that NASA was being briefed regularly in the period 1973 to 74 on a literally a massive scale of UFO activity that was taking place in Spain. Now, this is sort of very much like sort of the old school stuff we get in the early 50s with UFO landings, aliens taking soil samples, vehicle interference cases with engines stalling on cars, etc., etc. A massive wave of sightings from the early part of 73 right through to late 1974. The sort of thing we don't really see today, but that we did see, in the classic waves in the U.S., as I said, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. What I found particularly intriguing, is that all these cases of, like, vehicle interference where somebody's driving down the road late at night in their car, the lights go out, the engine fails, this craft comes down and these entities come towards the vehicle, the person has missing time, etc. Or, somebody just sees these weird little figures kind of scooping up dirt from the side of the road, or things that you would expect to see in like a Donald Kehoe book of the 50s or whatever. Not only were they happening in Spain in the early 70s, but NASA was being fully briefed on all these incidents. And of course, you have to ask the question, why would NASA be so interested in ground-based sightings of UFOs in Spain for an agency whose role predominantly is the realm of outer space? I could understand that NASA would be interested in astronaut sightings and things like that. But the very notion of, not even American sightings, but sightings in Spain, it sort of begs the question, is there some sort of clandestine group within NASA that not only takes note of outer space issues relative to UFOs and alien life, but actually what's going on down here as well? And I think that's a possibility. I mean, some of these reports from Spain are sort of really, really weird. I mean, the sort of thing, literally saying like something out the X-Files, somebody's cars stopped on the road and these 7-foot-tall, long-haired aliens stride out of the craft towards their vehicle, and the guy hits the accelerator, spins the wheels, and heads off into the fast lane while these aliens are stuck on the side, on the hard shoulder of the highway or whatever.
Right, getting flower samples and dirt samples.
Yeah, exactly.
Is this the same time period when they had the case of the aliens that were supposedly living in the cave and they were buying milk with gold? or was that earlier? Some of these Spanish cases kind of get jumbled up in my brain because there's so many strange ones.
The NASA stuff was actually later, or it may have been in roughly the same period. But I mean, I know from recollection that I think they from early '73 to late '74, NASA compiled something like 70 or 80 reports from Spain alone of profound close encounters, not lights in the sky, but people literally feeling their lives were in jeopardy by the close proximity of either these beings or these craft.
Yeah. I've got a few questions here from the forum that I'd like to toss at you. The first, it's actually about 3 questions, but they all basically kind of refer to the same sort of subject, and that is the actual formation of NASA. The question is, what is the historical makeup of NASA regarding groups which formed the institution, and who actually ran the early formation of NASA from 47 to 53?
Yeah, well, that's actually a very good question. I mean, what we really have to look at is the fact that in October 1957, the Soviets launched Sputnik, which really, at the height of the Cold War, this really did panic the Western world, and particularly the United States, the idea that, wow, we've actually been trumped in the race of space.
And then Lake of the Dog,
Yeah, then you got Lake of the Dog, who went up just, shortly afterwards, and Yuri Gagarin, the first man in space. As I said, the first satellite, the first animal, the first man, were all, done by the Russians. And you can understand this was something that really concerned the United States. But what happened was that, this was when President Eisenhower, Dwight D. Eisenhower, was, running the country, and he and his staff, they sort of astutely recognized that the world was changing. The old days of the Second World War, etc., were gone. That the domain of outer space was going to play some sort of significant role in the world's future. And what happened was that prior to NASA, you had an organization called the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, which essentially was a body that was delving into sort of early research into rocketry, etc., in the atmosphere, but that ultimately, would go beyond the atmosphere. The idea was that, well, the Russians have done this and they've done that. We really need to have an equivalent agency that can really play a forceful role in outer space. What happened was that by the early months of 1958, the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, NACA as it was known, was really sort of digging deep into how some sort of agency could run the banner, if you like, or fly the flag of outer space research. And in April 58, Eisenhower actually stood before Congress and announced the establishment of what originally was known as the National Aeronautical and Space Agency.
We have Nick Redfern, the books The NASA Conspiracies. Chris O'Brien's the co-host. I'm Gene Steinberg. You're in
the Paracast.
There you go.
Are you ready to order the official Paracast t-shirt? You asked, we answered. We're now taking orders for the official Paracast t-shirt. It comes in white, 100% cotton. The front of it features the same logo that we have on our community forums. On the back it says, separating signal from noise. To order the official Paracast t-shirt, here's all you have to do. Visit our new online store at store.theparacast.com. One more time, that's store.theparacast.com. You can use a major credit card to place your order for the official Paracast t-shirt. Hey neighbors, we have one more thing to talk about, and that's more merchandise at the official Paracast store. We have hats, we have jackets, we even have a flip video camcorder customized with the Paracast logo at the official Paracast store. It's all now available at the official Paracast store, store.theparacast.com.
We all know that Berkey Water Purification Systems are the most trusted name in water filtration. As an authorized Berkey dealer for over 5 years and serving thousands of satisfied customers, the Berkey Guy offers amazing specials for Berkey Water Filtration Systems. The Berkey Light Systems include a set of self-sterilizing and recleanable black purification elements that purify water by removing chlorine, pathogenic bacteria, cysts, and parasites to non-detectable levels and remove harmful chemicals such as herbicides and pesticides. Order the Berkey Light System today day, complete with 2 black Berkey elements for only $209, and the Berkey Guy will include 3 sport Berkey water bottles and ship everything to you free of charge. That's right, 3 sport Berkey water bottles and free shipping. An $87 value, yours free. Call the Berkey Guy at 1-877-886-3653. That's 1-877-886-3653. Or order online at GoBerkey.com. That's GoBerkey.com today.
You know the Constitution like the back of your hand. You've read books, listened to podcasts, attended lectures, surfed websites, and watched videos. You've made liberty your life's goal, but something seems to be missing. Stickers from LibertyStickers.com. Exercise your freedom of speech with the world's most dangerous bumper stickers. That's LibertyStickers.com. But wait, there's more. You can buy Liberty Stickers wholesale. Get them for 99 cents each when you put 100 or more in your shopping cart in any combination. Sell them or give them away. They're great for gun shows, flea markets, fairs, outreach, and more. Earn extra money, promote freedom, and spread the word. Need custom stickers, labels, or decals for your organization or business? Liberty Stickers makes them. Go to LibertyStickers.com to order or call 877-873-9626. LibertyStickers.com, the world's most dangerous stickers.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
After my second heart attack, I knew I needed more help than I had. That's when Extendovite came into my life. Made from garlic, cayenne, and 5 other herbs, I started to feel better in a very short time. My name's Don Wiskin, and I'm here because of Extendovite.
Extendovite gave me more energy than I've had in years. I am the only one in my house right now that's not sick from colds or flus. And I owe that all to Extendovite. My name is Rick, and I'm healthy because of Extendovite. To get your Extendovite, call 1-877-928-8822. That's 1-877-928-8822. Or visit the website at heartdrop.com. That's HEARTDROP.com.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
Are you tired of searching for great talk radio?
Something more important.
Search no more. We are the GCN Radio Network.
Hi, this is Ted Phillips, listening to the Paracast, and it's as good as it gets, believe me.
We have Nick Redfern. The book is the NASA Conspiracies, and we're exploring the conspiracies and UFOs and all sorts of great information here. Chris O'Brien's the co-host. I'm Gene Steinberg. You're in the Paracast. What Chris has been doing and will do during this segment of the Paracast is to continue to go over questions from our listeners. So here we go, Chris.
Okay. Here's an interesting one, Nick. I think you'll like this. We kind of sort of touched on this subject a little bit earlier, but the question is, and first it starts out with an observation. It seems that over the years, NASA's scope has greatly diminished. For those of us who have grown up with the idea that one of the greatest achievements of humankind has been manned space exploration, the agency's acronym might as well stand for not as satisfying anymore. It seems
I love that. Let's stop right there. Let's quit while we're ahead.
Well, hold on. It seems as if the agency's greatest achievements have been from the last century. So with that in mind, here's the question. Do you see NASA as being the powerful clandestine organization that it once was, or has it perhaps become so powerfully clandestine that it's actually doing all sorts of amazing things while giving us the impression that it is practically as useful as a boar's teat?
Well, I'm not entirely sure it's that simplistic, but I mean, I would agree that I think, when the moon landings occurred, there's a very good argument for saying that it was almost like an anticlimax afterwards.
Right.
And I think the important thing that should have happened, or the most critical thing, was that NASA capitalized on it and said, when Kennedy said in 62 we're going to land a man on the moon before the end of the 60s, we're going to have a manned presence on the moon, permanent presence by the start of the 21st century, and we're going to have astronauts going to Mars by 2020. Had that sort of vision been laid out forcefully, enthusiastically, authoritatively, then I think NASA would be in a very different position to that.
Well, publicly, Nick, I think what the questioner is kind of hinting at here is that NASA is really actually involved in all sorts of things, like a secret space program, if you will. And it's just giving us the impression that there's really nothing going on, that their manned space flight and space travel is all kind of a thing of the past. What sort of credence do you give the whole idea of a secret space program, that we're already on the moon, we're already on Mars, that sort of thing?
No, I actually think that's a very valid area. I mean, one of the reasons why I think it's valid is that we can draw a parallel with what we know from conventional aviation. For example, when the stealth bomber, this weird-looking big black triangular-shaped thing with the jagged edges was rolled out of the hangar for the public and the media to see in 1989, it actually been flying for, 10 years before that at prototype stage. So, the idea that the space shuttle, 30 years this year on, next year, but the space shuttle first flew in 81, 30 years on, do we really believe that the space shuttle is still the best that the U.S. military or government or NASA has, given the fact that only 7 years after Kennedy made his speech, we were on the moon, but 30 years we've not really got much further? I think that's sort of stretching credibility. So I actually don't rule out at all in the slightest, and I actually think there's a great deal of credibility to the notion that there could be a space program running in tandem to the one we know. It makes sense for the space shuttle to go up and put satellites into orbit, because that's what it does extremely well. But if you want to travel to the, further extremes, etc., you're going to need something else. And I think one of the things that actually ties into this very well is the story of Gary McKinnon.
Yeah, that was going to say,
Gary McKinnon is this computer hacker from England who hacked into NASA in search of information on UFOs and advanced technologies. And one of the things that McKinnon said he saw on NASA computers that he hacked into were references to reams and reams of names of what looked like military personnel that were all listed under the intriguing title of non-terrestrial officers. Now, this is sort of a very strangely worded phrase, non-terrestrial officers, and, NASA itself has either been totally silent or, chooses to ignore these terminologies, as does the military, the Pentagon, and everybody else. And to me, it doesn't sound, like something that McKinnon would simply spin out of thin air. It sounds like, for all the world, like some sort of, almost like an equivalent of an outer space aircraft carrier or something like that. Do you know what I mean? Some sort of crew on some sort of advanced vessel. Now, we can never know for sure, of course, but I think things like this, open us up to the idea that there could be a clandestine space program going on. I address this issue quite seriously in the book, that, there's maybe a systematic study has already been done on the face on Mars. Who knows? Perhaps we've made historic space flights to other worlds, in our solar system. Who knows? And we just haven't been told. Right. I suppose the cynical side of me would not find that surprising, that somebody's already gone to Mars and they choose not to tell us about it. That would just be typical.
Sure, but how do you get a handle on that? A rumor that we've already been to Mars, we have the clandestine space program, all this stuff is going on, this top secret space program. How the heck do you prove it?
Well, that's proving it's a big problem. But, I mean, we do know, for example, that NASA has been working with, on radical spacecraft designs. We know that Area 51, even if you take aliens out of the equation, at Area 51, there have been clearly some highly advanced prototype aircraft have been developed. We know that. We could argue that at least some, I think, of the so-called flying triangle reports are evidence of highly advanced military test platforms, etc. So, it's not that much of a leap to imagine if we're testing these things in our atmosphere, that somebody else could be testing more advanced things outside of the atmosphere. And, of course, I think if anybody is engaging in a a hidden space program, it would have to be to investigate the things that they don't want us to know about, because, if nobody had a problem with it, it would all be in the public domain. So I suspect that if there is this sort of second tier of a space program, it's purely and simply designed to investigate certain issues like the face on Mars, the idea of ancient life on Mars, or even possibly still living life on Mars. I don't actually rule that out. There have been some very weird photographs brought back from Mars that seem to show evidence of vegetation and water, etc., in certain locations. Maybe it's sort of the fact the paradigm challenging issues that these revelations would have that kind of inspires people to say, well, we're going to do it undercover. We're not going to do it via the open space program, if you like.
Well, that also brings up the whole subject of the militarization of space. I remember the wonderful plot element in the quite funny movie Space Cowboys, where these retired astronauts are sent back up into space to fix an old computer system on a huge, massive, nuclear device that has rockets pointed at the Earth and some huge orbiting space station. Where does NASA's involvement publicly end, and then where does that link to the militarization of space sort of start? Have you got any information on the percentage of launches that are military and secret and not divulged publicly? What is NASA just a public relations agency now for the militarization of space, do you think?
Well, that's actually a very good question. I mean, there's no doubt that, NASA legitimately launches satellites and space probes, into space that are designed to, fly to different planets in our solar system, Saturn, Venus, wherever, to try and determine what we can learn from these planets, et cetera, et cetera. But there's also the fact that a highly significant number of, particularly the space shuttle launches, are actually designed to place military satellites into Earth orbit. And most of these are like spy satellites, actually launched on behalf of people like the National Security Agency, the National Reconnaissance Office, and the CIA. They put in satellites into orbit that will be able to sort of spy on Russia, on China, on Iran, on Iraq, etc. And this happens all the time. And, this is where you have the public face of NASA involved in scientific exploration versus the private face of NASA actually launching satellites on behalf of the Defense Department and the intelligence community. And, the two issues, ironically, on the one hand, are inextricably linked because it's often the same vehicles launching them, the space shuttles, and the same crews. You often get certain astronauts going up time and time again. And yet the whole modus operandi, if you like, is totally different. On the one hand, it's scientific exploration. On the other hand, it's defense and intelligence-related issues. And I think this is an important issue to remember when it comes to government secrecy.
We'll get into more of that in a moment. We have Nicholas Redfern, author of the NASA Conspiracies. Chris O'Brien's the co-host. I'm Gene Steinberg. You're in
the Paracast.
Welcome back to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio. And now, here's Gene Steinberg.
We are in the final hour of the Paracast. I'm Gene Steinberg. Chris O'Brien's the co-host. Nick Redfern is the guest, talking about the book, The NASA Conspiracies. We've been involved in listener questions and lots more. Chris, any more questions or follow-ups?
Well, we have a question that is more about Nick's work here. And basically, it's one of our longtime posters. And he says, how does it feel to be on a roll? Between this book and the last one, it seems like his work is generating some serious discussion and good vibes. It's a far cry from the reaction to Body Snatchers. Do you feel that these books may become more of a legacy than the cryptozoological books that you've written? And you've written quite a number of good ones. And do you feel that they're more important?
Well, I mean, I appreciate the comments, that the person said. I mean, to be honest, I don't that often get into the deeper issue of what this book or that book's going to mean to people. I mean, I write about things, I'm not that, I've said this before, I'm not that deep a person. I write about the things I find interesting. And more importantly, because one thing I hate more than any other is when I pick a book up and it just goes over old ground,
right.
Which is why I always try and, even if I'm dealing with subjects that have been dealt with before, I always try and bring new information to the table. Like, for example, in this book, about the face on Mars, for example, one of the people I interviewed was the late Matt Tonis, who gave me a lot of information, about the whole, his theories on the face on Mars and what he felt it was and possibly still is and how it came into being, etc. And I think when you're looking at things like that, then if you can bring new information to the table, that's the most important thing, and that's what I try to do. Now, when you're looking at things like, do I feel this book's going to be more readily accepted than Body Snatchers? I don't worry about that. I put Body Snatchers out because this is the story I was told, and it presents a new spin on Roswell, and I felt it was an important story that people should be told about. I think in terms of people who look at things conventionally, if you can call it conventionally, that aliens are visiting the Earth and the government's hiding the information, yes, this book will probably be more popular. But do I feel that that's the most important issue why I write this book or that book? No. I put out information that I hope will kind of add to what we know or what we think we know, about the various phenomena we're investigating. I wouldn't want people to have sort of a cynical approach of, oh, this is going to sell more than that because it's saying what people want to hear. No, I would never do that. I'd rather walk away from the subject than do that.
There's probably also, I should be fair to add this, that I don't think there's enough money in any UFO or space conspiracy book to make it make sense to just grab it for a project. Nick can make a lot more money from doing mainstream stuff.
No, that's actually a very good point. Sort of alluded to before. I'm certainly not driving around in a Corvette. I'm actually driving around in a 7-year-old Ford Taurus, which is actually, I won't say it's seen better days, but it's a 7-year-old Ford Taurus. I think it's one of these situations where you're quite right that it doesn't matter what, to take the cynical approach. If you're writing books about UFO, you're probably going to sell X thousand of copies, 3, 4, 5,000 copies, who knows what. But, my approach has always been, whatever I write about, I want to try and bring something new. And often, that bringing something new doesn't always bring what people want to hear. If I wanted to sell 50,000 copies of a book, I would never have written Body Snatchers, which, tells a story of a very alternative, down-to-earth theory, although a dark theory for Roswell. If I wanted to, sort of have a good position within the UFO community, I wouldn't have written that. But I don't care about having a good position in the UFO community. I care about telling a story that potentially I feel is important. If I worry about what people thought about me and whether I was saying the right thing, I'd never do anything. I do what I feel is important to do. And
yeah, you wouldn't write a book about the trickster.
Well, I would, but the trickster, joking aside, people like yourself, have done so much good research. It's like, why would I go blundering into that? But if I found, sort of a new angle on the Kecksburg story that nobody had mentioned before, then I would think, wow, I'll do a book on this. But, it's like, why go blundering into certain areas that there are other people such as yourself, like the trickster angle, know far more about. I would sooner, go with areas I feel comfortable writing about, but where I can add something new to it. And, the whole, like you just pointed out, the whole idea of selling books is really irrelevant when the market for UFO books is fairly small anyway. It's not a relevant issue to me.
Okay, one of the areas that you do talk about that has been covered somewhat, I think, over the years in various books, not as in-depth, I think, as it deserves, but one of the things that's always intrigued me, and I'm sure others out there in the listening audience, is some of these really amazing, like the STS-80 footage, some of these object sightings that have been reported over the years by astronauts, Santa Claus is real. What was the famous quote from the Apollo astronauts? You have a very intriguing chapter that talks about Gordon Cooper and Jim McDivitt rather, and some of the astronaut sightings. Do you want to just kind of briefly go over some of those?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is one of the most important issues. When you talk about conspiracy theories, cover-ups, and government documents, but when you actually get NASA astronauts talking on the record about their own personal experiences of UFOs or knowledge of UFOs, then that sort of takes things to a whole different level. I mean, one of them, one of the most important characters was Gordon Cooper, one of the original Gemini astronauts. Now, he was someone who, was very vocal, even to the United Nations, by presenting statements to the United Nations that, yes, UFOs were real. And one of the reasons he believed this was because, rather ironically, before he became a NASA astronaut in the early 50s, when he was with the U.S. military and taking part in missions over Europe, to sort of see what the Russians were doing, he had a UFO experience of his own, seeing these saucer-like objects flying high in the sky that the military actually said were seed pods, which is, like the most bizarre.
That one always blows my mind.
Yeah. I mean, ironically, it almost sounds like something out of the Invasion of the Body Snatchers, it's like pods in the sky or whatever. But I don't think that was what the military were trying to, instill, but it was just trying to find out, or trying to present a down-to-earth theory. But it was because of this and then other experiences where, he'd seen film footage of UFOs out at Edwards Air Force Base landing and taking off that inspired Cooper to, really get behind the idea that there was a genuine UFO phenomenon. And also, Edgar Mitchell, who, commanded one of the Apollo moon missions that landed on the moon in 1971, Mitchell has actually gone on record as stating that not only does he believe UFOs are real, but he was actually got information from insider sources very recently that, yes, Roswell was real and it involved aliens. Now, if this was anything to do with other than UFOs, the mainstream media would be, doing all it could to get to the bottom of this story. But it's almost as if when it comes to UFOs, even if it's coming from like a NASA astronaut, that it's like, and finally, to lighten the day, here's what astronaut so-and-so has to say about aliens. It's like...
maybe the thing is also, Nick, is that, okay, these guys are getting on in years, and you say, he was an astronaut 40 years ago. He's getting on in years. He's a little bit light in the head. So he believes in UFOs. Ha, ha, ho, ho. That's an excuse. Obviously, not an excuse we'd want to regard as valid, but maybe we can see why that's happening. The book is called The NASA Conspiracies. The author is called Nick Redfern, and we can go into why in a long time passing, but that's another story. We also have Chris O'Brien, the co-host. You can write us, news@theparacast.com, news@theparacast.com. I'm Gene Steinberg, and why I was called Gene Steinberg is another story that also is not germane to this situation. You're in
the Paracast.
Jacques Vallée, Bud Hopkins, Brad Steiger, Nick Redfern, Lauren Coleman. You'll find classic and new books by these and many other authors at Anomalous Books, the #1 publisher of 14 books on the planet. They specialize in books on UFOs and aliens, Bigfoot and cryptozoology, parapsychology and the paranormal, as well as alternative history, all of which makes Anomalous Books simply phenomenal. Check out their catalog at anomalousbooks.com. That's ANOMALIST books.com. For 58 years, Fate has provided true reports of the strange and unknown. Fate brings you the latest in all aspects of the paranormal, like angels and miracles, psychic phenomena, ghosts, UFOs, and much, much more. To receive your complimentary Fate magazine, call now at 1-800-728-2730 or visit their website at www.fatemag.com. That's 1-800-728-2730. What are you waiting for? Your fate awaits. this.
When making important financial decisions, you should always know the facts. That's why Midas Resources is willing to pay you to read the facts. Midas Resources, a team of hand-picked financial specialists with decades of financial experience who are ready to provide you with state-of-the-art, up-to-date financial services. Midas Resources offers a host of services and stands behind their products. In fact, if you call and order their free Midas report, Midas Resources will pay you. This detailed report will provide you with financial history on the safest and most profitable areas to invest in. If you read the report, Midas Resources will send you a free Walking Liberty silver $50. So what are you waiting for? Get the facts and call Midas Resources toll free at 888-292-2709. That's 888-292-2709. And remember, if you read the Midas report, you'll receive a free Walking Liberty silver $50.
We all know that Berkey water purification systems are the most trusted name in water filtration. As an authorized Berkey dealer for over 5 years and serving thousands of satisfied customers, the Berkey Guy offers amazing specials for Berkey water filtration systems. The Berkey Light systems include a set of self-sterilizing and recleanable black purification elements that purify water by removing chlorine, pathogenic bacteria, cysts, and parasites to non-detectable levels and remove harmful chemicals such as herbicides and pesticides. Order the Berkey Light system today, complete with 2 black Berkey elements for only $209, and the Berkey Guy will include 3 sport Berkey water bottles and ship everything to you free of charge. That's right, 3 sport Berkey water bottles and free shipping. An $87 value, yours free. Call the Berkey Guy at 1-877-886-3653. That's 1-877-886-3653. Or order online at GoBerkey.com. That's GoBerkey.com today.
I'm concerned about food for my family in the event of an emergency, and I know you are too. Are you ready? Don't wait for an emergency to happen. Put a plan together now with quality dehydrated food from Ready Reserve Foods. For nearly 40 years, Ready Reserve Foods has been in continuous operation, canning the finest in dehydrated foods. Other companies just broker canned foods. Ready Reserve is the manufacturer, controlling quality from start to finish with double enameled cans and nitrogen packing for maximum shelf life. Ready Reserve offers a balanced selection of fruits, vegetables, dairy products, proteins, and grains. Choose from a variety of pre-selected units or order by individual can to customize your own plan. When you purchase from Ready Reserve Foods, you are buying factory direct at wholesale prices. Call today for a free catalog, 1-800-453-2202, or visit ReadyReserveFoods.com. Call 1-800-453-2202. Ready Reserve Foods, factory direct, wholesale pricing.
The GCN Radio Network, providing the world with hard-hitting talk radio. GCN. Great talk radio starts here.
We want to hear from you. If you have a comment or question about the Paracast, send it to news@theparacast.com. That's news@theparacast.com. And don't forget to visit our famous Paracast community forums at forum.theparacast.com. Get in on all the action at forum.theparacast.com.
We have Nick Redfern joining us on the Paracast to talk about the NASA Conspiracies, his latest book. Chris O'Brien's the co-host. And we've been looking at, obviously, the situation involving NASA people, astronauts all saying there's something to the UFO mystery. But the question, I guess, is always raised here, is it because they simply look at the evidence and believe in UFOs, or in one case here, maybe they have access to something, or are they trying to tell us something a lot more?
Well, it's one of these things where you can always look at it 2 ways. I mean, for example, I point out in the final chapter of the book, when you come to the issue of are they trying to tell us something more, I point out this relationship that's sort of developing and growing between NASA and the Vatican. Now, a lot of people don't realize, and a lot of people do, that the Vatican has a very deep interest in astronomy, outer space, and non-human life.
They have an observatory just up the road from me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. And the Vatican's been very vocal about the idea that it's okay for the Catholic Church and its followers to believe in aliens, and it doesn't take away from their belief systems or long-term beliefs, etc. And the fact that, this is in tandem with NASA has led a lot of people, quite legitimately, to wonder if this is part of some sort of slow drip feed process to acclimatize us to the idea that not only is it okay to believe in aliens in a theoretical sense, but also that they really do exist and they are actually coming here. So, I think we can look at it from the idea that, yes, aliens are here and they're visiting, and there's this indoctrination process in some terms, which kind of sounds like a sinister term, and it may well be. Or, maybe they realize there's a phenomenon, but they don't have all the answers. I think it could be somewhere between the two. I think there's often a tendency to think if governments investigate UFOs and they hide information, that's because they have all the answers. It may be they don't have all the answers, but rather they know something's going on, but they're not entirely sure how to deal with it, what it means, or what the implications and the agenda are behind the whole UFO phenomenon. And I think those are all important issues that we should bear in mind. And
also, the matter of fact here, Nick, it would cause panic, wouldn't it, on the part of some people if governments say, hey, we don't know what's in our skies.
Yeah, I think that's the important thing. If the government was to simply say, okay, back in the 40s and 50s, we were visited, and these things, they did abduct a few people, and it was kind of sinister, and we didn't want to tell you back then, but they've either gone away or they're not doing this anymore. There might be that would be cause concern, but it wouldn't be overwhelming concern, I don't think. But a statement to the effect that something's interacting with us, but number one, we don't know what it is, number two, we don't know where it's from, and number three, we don't really know what it's doing here, and whether it's friendly or hostile or somewhere in between or ambivalent or whatever, and we're not able to stop it from happening. I think that issue would be of concern. And it's kind of like, it's like in England, we have this phrase that, you can't be a little bit pregnant. It's kind of like, with respect to UFOs, you cannot tell part of the story. If Obama or whoever, God forbid Sarah Palin, had to say that UFOs existed, well, it's like, that won't be enough. That it will not satisfy anyone enough to say that UFOs exist. Questions will be asked, well, what about abductions? What about cattle mutilations? What about this? What about that? And the floodgates will be opened. And I think that's the big concern. I actually don't think it's so much the concern, it's the fact that alien may exist that is the overriding reason for the secrecy. It's the knock-on effect and the additional questions that will inevitably be provoked by such a revelation that concerns the government and NASA.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Just kind of going back to the Vatican involvement in space and interest in space, perhaps part of the slow drip process is naming the Pope Benedict and putting in a guy that looks like an alien. He's one of the most demonic-looking people I've ever seen a photograph of. And I guess if people don't recoil to him, perhaps there's hope for some sort of disclosure at some point. I'm sorry, I just couldn't resist.
No, I understand what you say. I think the important thing to remember as well is that, if the Vatican's saying something, either the Vatican knows, well, that's going to be intriguing itself, but what if the Vatican is only going on what it's been told by NASA and other agencies, and the Vatican is deceived as much as we are? I point out in the book, I have chapters in the book that look at issues that concern UFOs and the theory as to what lies behind the UFO phenomenon, but they have nothing to do with aliens. As you probably remember, there's one chapter in the book that sort of focuses very much in similar pathways to those covered by Matt Tonis in his Cryptoterrestrials book. I have a chapter in there about a NASA contractor guy who had a classic contactee experience in 1973. He had this encounter like a long-haired alien out in the desert and was briefed by NASA and was told, these aren't aliens, they're a deceptive ancient human race and we should not trust them and keep yourself as far away from them as possible. It's like if the Vatican comes out with something, can we even trust it? Not because we may not be able to trust the Vatican, but we may not be able to trust what the Vatican was told itself.
Hey, Chris, any more questions left?
The chapter in there on the involvement of NASA and the abduction phenomenon is I think has some really interesting, raises some interesting questions. Do you want to address that a little bit? You mentioned the contactee being contacted by NASA about his experience. How about the abduction phenomenon?
This is another one that's sort of a little-known area. Again, as I mentioned earlier, that we know that that NASA obviously keeps a close track on what's going on in outer space. But the idea that it's actually watching also what's going on the Earth with respect, literally on the Earth itself with respect to UFOs is sort of a surprising issue. Now, I interviewed a woman from the book named Sharon who actually still works in a secretarial position at NASA's Kennedy Space Center to this day, and that is her, for people who are wondering, that is her first real name. So it might not actually be that difficult for NASA to know. There probably aren't that many Sharons working at the NASA Kennedy Space Center. But she told me how she'd had these sort of classic alien abduction experiences, the typical thing of being taken to craft, examined, probed, etc., then returned to her bedroom and so forth. But over time, particularly when she was living with her boyfriend, who was present when some of these experiences occurred, he said, she never actually left bedroom. It was almost like it was an internal, subjective experience in her mind. She happened to mention this to people at work at NASA and was then approached by a woman who worked for the agency and said, can I speak to you about your experiences? And, as I stress in the book, it wasn't like a Man in Black type experience where she was threatened and intimidated into silence. It was along the lines of, well, we've heard about your story, very interesting. There are people in NASA that are intrigued by all this and concerned by it, and we'd just like to get your story on record. It will add to the body of data we have. And the story that she was given by NASA was very, very kind of unsettling, and actually sort of focuses on some of the stuff in my Final Events book, that these entities weren't extraterrestrial, that they were like deceptive, occult-based creatures that were, I guess, almost like feeding on the human life force, if you like, and that NASA was deeply concerned about this and was trying to get as much information on record as it could, and that they thanked her afterwards and said, well, don't say too much about it, but, we appreciate you telling us.
I appreciate your telling us all this, Nick, because we have to take another break. Nick Redfern's the guest. The book is called The NASA Conspiracies. Chris O'Brien's our co-host. I'm Gene Steinberg. You're in
The Paracast. The Paracast.
Is there a secret UFO agenda? Do strange creatures from the darkest corners of the mind roam the earth? Is there evidence for mind control, time travel, or devious government conspiracies? Find out the inside scoop on the latest conspiracies, paranormal activity, and Fortean phenomena when you subscribe to Tim Beckley's Conspiracy Journal. It's jam-packed with stories, special book and DVD promotions, and the best news, it's absolutely free, sent right to your mailbox. Plus, a bonus free email newsletter sent out every Friday. Simply send an email with your name and address to Mr. UFO at webtv.net. That's Mr. UFO at webtv.net. Find out what they don't want you to know.
Attention, an important product from hempusa.org, microplant powder, will change your life by removing all types of positive toxins, such as heavy metals, parasites, bacteria, viruses, and fungus from the digestive tract and stomach wall so you can absorb nutrients. Microplant powder is 89% silica and packed with a negative charge that attracts positive toxins from the blood, organs, spine, and brain. This product has the ability to rebuild cartilage and bone, which allows synovial fluid to return to the joints. Silica is a precursor to calcium, meaning the body turns silica into calcium and is great for the heart. There is no better time than now to have microplant powder on your shelf or in your storage shelter. And with an unlimited shelf life, you can store it anywhere. Call 908-691-2608 or visit hempusa.org. It's a great way to change your life. So call 908-691-2608 or visit us at hempusa.org today.
You know the Constitution like the back of your hand. You've read books, listened to podcasts, attended lectures, surfed websites, and watched videos. You've made liberty your life's goal, but something seems to be missing. Stickers from LibertyStickers.com. Exercise your freedom of speech with the world's most dangerous bumper stickers. That's LibertyStickers.com. But wait, There's more. You can buy Liberty stickers wholesale. Get them for 99 cents each when you put 100 or more in your shopping cart in any combination. Sell them or give them away. They're great for gun shows, flea markets, fairs, outreach, and more. Earn extra money, promote freedom, and spread the word. Need custom stickers, labels, or decals for your organization or business? Liberty Stickers makes them. Go to libertystickers.com to order or call 877-873-9626. libertystickers.com, the world's most dangerous stickers.
Hello. At ofthefield.com, we strive to empower you with wild food preparedness. We get lots of amazing positive feedback, most of which we feature on ofthefield.com. Here's a small sample of all that people like you have to say about the wild food experience.
It's inspiring for many who are affected by the recent downturn of the economy.
I already knew a bit about foraging and edibles, but you take it to a whole new level.
1,000 thanks to you for all that great knowledge. It was empowering.
When I was in the Navy, I went through a couple of quick land survival classes.
Thank you for being an inspiration and for all the work that you do.
I really appreciate the depth and detail of the information.
Thank you so much.
Much love and respect to you from all of us here in the boonies.
Thanks again.
Knowledge is power, and that power brings peace.
Folks, thanks for letting us help you get back to basics. Read all of the testimonials at ofthefield.com. You can order online for you and your loved ones or call 1-888-51-EAT-FREE to share in the secret.
On air, online, and on demand. We are the GCN Radio Network.
This is the Paracast. You never know what's going to happen next.
We have Nick Redfern, author of the NASA Conspiracies, Chris O'Brien, the co-host. I'm Gene Steinberg. You're in the Paracast, and so the beings seem demonic. You have more to say on that before we get to the next question?
Well, I mean, my view on this whole thing, like, when we did the interview with Final Events, is that I think whether they're extraterrestrial, interdimensional, crypto-terrestrial, demonic, time travelers, whatever, what this tells us is that there's a genuine UFO phenomenon, but nobody really has a good handle on what lies at the heart of it beyond the fact that the phenomenon exists. And I think that's a critical issue to remember, is that, as I said, we think government agencies have all the answers and they're hiding the truth. I think they're hiding significant facts about the existence of a genuine UFO presence, but they may have no real idea of the specific origin of the phenomenon than we do. They may be grasping at straws, and NASA's, or the view of certain people in NASA that it's an ancient terrestrial race like Mactonis talked about, or that it's demonic, just typifies the fact that everybody's thinking, what on earth's going on? Who are they?
So maybe if we ignore it, they'll go away.
Well, we can hope, but I somehow have doubts about that.
Okay, Gene, I kind of finished up, my list of questions and the ones on the forum. Where do you want to take it?
I'm going to take it to the face on Mars.
There you go.
To the objects, the artifacts. And, of course, one of the guests we've never had on the show, and I'm not going to say whether he won't be on in the future. He hasn't been on yet. That was, of course, our friend Mr. Hoagland. Now, the first time we had Mac Tonys on the show, we weren't talking about crypto-terrestrials. We were talking about the mysteries on Mars. You do touch into some of these things like the face on Mars. Any provenance to that in your research, Nick?
Well, I mean, the biggest problem we have with the face on Mars, in terms of evaluating it, is the fact that it's on Mars, which is millions of miles away. That's the biggest problem. We cannot go there, or at least most of us can't, even if clandestinely, who knows, maybe somebody has. But if they haven't, then all we're forced to work with is photographic evidence and personal interpretations, theories, and ideas. And there's absolutely no doubt that the face on Mars looks intriguing. Now, NASA doesn't ignore the issue. If you ask NASA, they will quite openly answer questions, but their view is that it's kind of like people seeing faces in clouds. That's their view. It's the idea that, people know what faces look like, so if you see one in a cloud and it looks like a face, it's well, that looks like a face. And that's what they say with the face on Mars, that people are just, putting random imagery together in a fashion where it's something that they can recognize. But when you look at the bigger picture and you see that very near in the region of Cydonia, where the face on Mars can be found, you see what eerily look like ruined pyramid-type structures. And the face on Mars looks very Sphinx-like, whereas the Sphinx in Egypt points outwards. The face on Mars points upwards, however. But, I think Mac Toney, so I interviewed extensively for the book on this particular chapter, made an extremely good case for the fact that the face is artificial, very, very ancient, probably built by, some indigenous Martian species long obviously before Mars's atmosphere decayed and finally, was just destroyed.
So basically, these are the deserts of Barsoom, as they said in the old Edgar Rice Burroughs stories.
Yeah, exactly. And Mac did hypothesize on the idea that perhaps, when the Martian atmosphere began to fragment and disintegrate, that possibly the last fragments of this society could have made their way here. Maybe ironically, all our stories about gods coming to the Earth could be the last vestiges of some survival mission from Mars to here, and that ironically, we are actually the Martians,
That's what I keep trying to tell people. They say, well, you believe in aliens. I say, yeah, I believe in aliens. We're the aliens.
Sure. Men are from Venus, women are from Mars, or is it the reverse? Men are from Mars, women are from Venus?
We were probably seeded here. Who knows?
Yeah,
okay, all right. So we have the face on Mars, that possibility. What about things going on perhaps on the moon? Strange things.
Well, yeah, one of the more interesting stories was a former Air Force guy named Carl Wolf, who worked on a NASA program, or was sort of contracted, if you like, in the mid-'60s, and said that he spoke with an airman at one particular NASA contractor installation where supposedly NASA had photographed on the far side of the moon what looked like, almost like a base, like a city on the far side of the moon, which is, incredibly controversial. But Carl Wolf has stood by his story. He has a very credible background. Said, I spoke with this guy, and he was sort of highly concerned about the fact that these structures have been photographed on the far side of the moon, which seemed to imply some sort of, as I said, a base or a city that clearly wasn't ours or the Russians back in the mid-1960s. And there have been things like obelisks, having been photographed on the moon that look very, very weird and that don't seem to be natural rock formations. And again, things like this, when you see these odd formations, it's incredibly difficult to just write them off as anomalies of nature. When we see so many of them, and it leads me to believe that, there's far more going on in outer space and in our immediate, near Earth space as well, the moon, Mars, wherever, that we just simply haven't begun to appreciate, or at least the general public and the media hasn't. Whether or not somebody in the intelligence community and NASA has, that's an entirely different question, which I think is a valid question as well.
Would it be a reason for NASA not to want to go back to the moon?
Well, one of the theories that's been put forward is that we were warned off, and that's been mentioned in a number of books, but it's such a vague statement that you have to wonder how or why would we have been warned off. I think my personal view is that either we didn't go back and there was a catastrophic public relations blunder where NASA really should have capitalized with not just the public but the media and Congress to say, really fund us well and we'll do fantastic things. It was either a catastrophic blunder where they didn't do that, or there has really been some sort of secret in tandem space program running alongside the mainstream one that really has achieved fantastic results that we just don't know about. Or maybe it's a bit of the two. Maybe there was a huge blunder in public relations and NASA didn't capitalize on the moon landings, but at the same time, somebody else in conjunction with NASA and working with them, really has developed technologies to go further than we really realize.
So why spend billions of dollars on technology that is basically ancient? Why deal with ancient technology if there's new stuff out there to deal with?
Well, I think part of the reason could be that the people who are working on what some of us might term ancient technologies may actually not know the other ones have this highly advanced technology. It's the whole issue of compartmentalization. The idea that Agency A doesn't know what Agency B is doing. The notion that just because somebody is still working with rocket-based technology and fossil fuels they may not be doing that as a cover. They may legitimately not realize that somebody else is working with truly groundbreaking technologies that make, their technology look like somebody whacking a rock against a stone to try and get a bit of fire going, in a caveman type scenario. I don't think necessarily NASA's current space, it is a secret space program. I don't necessarily think the current space program, the visible one, is a cover story. It may be the people that are working on the space shuttle programs, etc., just don't know that there's this far more advanced program in existence.
Wouldn't they suspect? I mean, how do you keep that secret? I mean, you have to have private industry building the spaceships, and that's a big question, and maybe we have to explore that. How do you take a secret space program? I don't mean, flying spy satellites and stuff like that. We know that's going on. I mean more advanced exploration with more advanced aircraft stuff that will really make your socks fly off, We have Nick Redfern. He's author of The NASA Conspiracies, where we explore the good, bad, and ugly of the various conspiracies. By the way, neighbors, check out our forums, forum.theparacast.com, forum.theparacast.com, where when we have advance warning, you can ask our questions. You can ask questions of our forthcoming guests. We have Chris O'Brien as the co-host. I'm Gene Steinberg. You're in
Paracast.
Are you ready to order the official Paracast t-shirt? You asked, we answered. We're now taking orders for the official Paracast t-shirt. It comes in white, 100% cotton. The front of it features the same logo that we have on our community forums. On the back it says, separating signal from noise. To order the official Paracast t-shirt, here's all you have to do. Visit our new online store at store.theparacast.com. One more time, that's store.theparacast.com. You can use a major credit card to place your order for the official Paracast t-shirt. Hey neighbors, we have one more thing to talk about, and that's more merchandise at the official Paracast store. We have hats, we have jackets, we even have a flip video camcorder customized with the Paracast logo at the official Paracast store. It's all now available at the official Paracast store, store.theparacast.com.
Before you throw away your used batteries, you need to listen to this. Now, going green can save money. Go green and save money by giving life to your used batteries by charging them with the Renaissance Charger. The Renaissance Charger uses a new revolutionary battery charging technology that effectively extends the life of new batteries and gives new life to used batteries. Invented by legendary audio genius John Bedini, this unique and patented charging system rejuvenates the electrochemical plate structure in the battery without additives, increasing capacity and maintaining cell integrity. Renaissance Charge offers a full line of products made in the USA for all types and sizes of batteries. Find out why our customers tell us the Renaissance Charger is the only battery charger they will ever use. Save your money. Save the environment. Visit us online at r-charge.com. That's r-charge.com, or call us at 208-772-4514. That's 208-772-4514. Be a part of the revolution today.
Hi, I'm Mark Craighead, founder of Crossbreed Holsters. I designed our top-selling holster, the Super Tuck Deluxe, to solve the problems of being poked, pinched, and gouged while carrying concealed. The Super Tuck Deluxe is the most comfortable, most concealable holster on the market today. We offer a 2-week free trial and a lifetime warranty.
Visit us at crossbreedholsters.com. Don't forget, crossbreedholsters.com.
Hi, this is Ted Anderson. Have you ever wondered why banks, stockbrokers, investment advisors won't talk about gold IRAs? They've been available since 1986, yet the financial industry won't recognize the value of gold for your retirement. Gold has outperformed paper investments, yet no word about IRAs. If you would like to have gold for your retirement, call 800-686-2237. Don't get left behind by rising inflation and low returns. Call 800-686-2237. Secure your future future and call 1-800-686-2237.
Did you know that you can be tracked and traced when you're online? With identity theft and cybercrimes on the rise, your passwords, your identity, and even your physical location can be revealed to complete strangers. Would you like to surf the internet anonymously and not have to worry about these threats? Well, now you can by visiting patriotinternet.com. For about $2 per month, patriotinternet.com will conceal your IP address and your physical location, allowing you to browse the web, send emails, and instant message anonymously. patriotinternet.com will bypass filters, blocked sites, and keyword blocking. You can also bypass logging by your router and your ISP. With patriotinternet.com, there is no software to install and uses 128-bit encryption for your protection. When using wireless hotspots, patriotinternet.com shields your information from identity thieves and is compatible with Windows, Mac, and Linux. Protect your identity and your freedom with anonymous internet access from patriotinternet.com. Visit patriotinternet.com today.
America's #1 source for independent talk radio for over a decade. We are the GCN Radio Network.
Hi, this is Don Ecker, and you are tuned into the Paracast. Let me tell you what, you're going to hear stuff here that you probably won't hear anywhere else. Hear that, George Snorri?
Nick Redfern, speaking fast, Paracast.
First.
Okay.
First.
Right.
Okay.
There used to be a guy on TV, by the way. I think he did commercials for Federal Express, and he had to talk very fast. I think he later became a politician, but that's another story and probably not true. Chris O'Brien's our co-host. I'm Gene Steinberg. We're in the Paracast. So I guess we're talking about here the possibility of a top secret space program.
Yeah.
And about keeping all this a secret from even the public NASA.
Yeah, I think the important thing to remember when it comes to whether or not NASA or any agency could hide all this from the general public is that if you go back to, for example, the moon landings in 69 to 72, you had this huge Apollo spacecraft, which was, the rocket was like the size of a skyscraper, and yet the actual craft that landed on the moon was just a very tip, this tiny capsule with 3 astronauts crammed into it like sardines in a can, and the lunar module, the whole couple of 100 feet of the rest of it was just fuel. Well, if today we've developed something that doesn't require this huge rocket for fuel, you could actually have something that's like the size of the moon lander, which is like 20 feet. And if that is the case, potentially we could be flying things to the moon or Mars 20, 30 feet in size that nobody would ever see taking off. That's the whole thing with the Apollo missions. You couldn't hide them because the craft was such a huge, humongous thing, And I think that's the important thing. We could be flying stuff from Area 51, a 50-foot diameter craft, hypothetically, using some highly advanced propulsion system that would be, necessarily wouldn't need to have lights on it, wouldn't need to be illuminated. It would take off at night. No one would see it taking off, and it would just, leave the atmosphere and head to point A, B, or C. And so it would be very easy to hide the fact. It's like no one could hide a space shuttle liftoff because it's such a huge, unwieldy, gigantic machine. Not just the shuttle, but the fuel tank and the boosters and everything else, and the launch tower that it's attached to. But if you've got something that's the size of like a Greyhound bus that could travel to Mars, who's going to see it? It actually wouldn't, ironically, be that difficult to hide.
All right, so maybe there could be a secret space program here.
I think that's a genuinely interesting, intriguing scenario. I wouldn't, I wouldn't fall down in a dead faint if it was one day proven to be real.
But, with all these mysteries, how the heck do you prove any of it?
Well, that's the big question. I mean, it's like any aspect of the whole UFO phenomenon. It's clear from government records, witness testimony, military people coming forward now they're in their 60s, 70s, or 80s, that clearly something's going on. What we don't have, unfortunately, and I'll be the first to admit it doesn't help my own case, but I will be honest enough to admit we don't have that definitive smoking gun that will prove this or that is going on. And that's what we're striving to find. Now, whether there is a smoking gun or even just the government suspects that certain things are going on, I'm not sure. But clearly something is. The big question is how we access that so-called black box where the material might be hidden. You know, the ironic thing is that the one person who may have come closer than anybody else in recent years is Gary McKinnon. And as a result of his sort of penetration of trying to find the truth, he now faces extradition to the US and 70 years in jail. You know, that's the harsh reality of what happens when you try and access the black box that we cannot access publicly and legitimately.
So basically, if you find out the truth, they'll come after you. What's happening with Gary McKinnon, by the way? They're still trying to extradite him, right?
Yeah, the US is still trying to extradite him because, you know, of the whole, not so much because of the UFO angle. I mean, they don't talk about that so much. It's more along the lines of, you know, he penetrated our computer systems. He, according to, you know, the military and NASA, he actually affected and adversely affected the computer systems to where some of them were rendered inoperable or at least, you know, unusable for a while. And the very fact of hacking, and also he left a number of statements relative to, you know, things like conspiracy theories concerning 9/11 and war on terror, that they came after him. I think with McKinnon, you know, it's like, on the one hand, it would be ridiculous for somebody to think they could hack into the government's, you know, classified systems of any government and get away with it, and of course he didn't. But what I also think is that I actually don't believe that McKinnon's sentence, if he is sentenced, will reflect the nature of his crime. I think what will happen is that it's entirely possible he could have the entire book thrown at him and given the worst possible treatment as a means to say to everybody else, you know, you try something similar, you're going to get the same as McKinnon. So in other words, McKinnon's sentence may not reflect his crime. It may actually reflects a way of warning everybody else, you do this, you're going to get 70 years or whatever. But equally, you know, if McKinnon is brought to the US and to stand trial, it's entirely possible that an entire can of worms could be